The golden shores of Kilwa, you step onto the bustling 14th century beach of Kilwa Kisiwani, where the air smells of salt, cloves, and infinite opportunity. Section 2. The money that grows on reefs. We travel mentally to the Maldives to witness the harvesting of supreme moneta, the small gastropod that became a global currency. Section 3. Why not gold? You explore the economic logic behind using shells as money portability, durability, and why you can't just counterfeit nature. Section 4. Riding the monsoon highway, you stand on the deck of a dhow, waiting for the Kaskazi winds that dictate the entire rhythm of the Indian Ocean trade. Section 5. The dhows arrive. The horizon fills with triangular sails as merchants from Arabia and India navigate the treacherous reefs to dock at your port. Section 6. The middlemen of the coast, you meet the Swahili brokers, masters of hospitality and negotiation, who translate culture as fluidly as they translate language. Section 7. Stone towns and coral palaces. We walk through the narrow streets of a city built literally from the ocean, where coral rag architecture signals immense merchant wealth. Section 8. The inland caravan routes. You turn your back to the sea and look inward, tracing the dangerous paths porters took to bring ivory and gold to the coast. Section 9. Gold for glossy shells. We connect the dots between the Swahili Coast and the mysterious interior kingdoms like Great Zimbabwe, where cowries were traded for heavy gold. Section 10. The art of counting money. You sit in a counting house, learning the tedious rhythmic process of stringing shells into manageable denominations for large transactions. Section 11. When money rots or breaks, we examine the fragility of this economy, exploring what happens when a shipment is crushed or when bad money floods the market. Section 12. The Dragon Fleet visits. You witness the awe-inspiring arrival of Chinese treasure ships and the exchange of Celadon pottery for African giraffe and shell currency. Section 13. Spices, silk, and cotton. We delve into the Indian connection, unpacking the colorful textiles and pungent spices that Swahili traders bought with their stockpiled shells. Section 14. A language born of bargaining. You listen to the street chatter, realizing how the Swahili language itself evolved as a tool to facilitate this complex international banking. Section 15. Trust as the first credit card. We analyze the invisible ledger of Islamic finance and reputation-based credit that allowed deals to happen without written contracts. Section 16. The human cost of commerce. You confront the darker reality of the trade network, seeing how cowries were grimly used to purchase enslaved people for export. Section 17. Sails with Red Crosses. The mood shifts as you spot Portuguese caravels on the horizon, bringing gunpowder and a demand for monopoly that shatters the peace. Section 18. Cannons against coral walls. You witness the bombardment of the stone towns, watching as centuries of carefully curated trade relationships are severed by cannon fire. Section 19. The Omani Reclamation. We fast forward to the Omani intervention, seeing how the trade networks were rebuilt and reshaped under the new Sultanate of Zanzibar. Section 20. The West African Connection. You trace the incredible journey of East African shells being shipped all the way around the Cape to fuel the currency markets of West Africa. Section 21. The Inflation Flood. We watch as European powers industrialize the cowrie harvest, dumping tons of shells into Africa and causing the first great hyperinflation. Section 22. The Collapse of the Shell Standard. You experience the economic chaos as colonial powers ban the shell to force the use of their own coins, rendering savings worthless overnight. Section 23. Digging up the ledger, we join modern archaeologists sifting through the sand, finding hordes of shells that tell the story of forgotten bank vaults. Section 24. Echoes in the Sand. You look at modern fashion and rituals in the region to see how the spirit of the cowrie persists as a symbol of fertility and wealth. Section 25. The Value of a Promise. We conclude by reflecting on what money actually is, followed by a gentle wind down to help you drift off to sleep. Stop, awaiting continue. Hey everyone, tonight we are going to dismantle everything you think you know about the history of money. We usually picture banking history as a bunch of medici in velvet robes signing papers in Florence, or perhaps serious men in London coffeehouses inventing insurance. But centuries before the Bank of England laid its first brick, there was a financial network so sophisticated, so vast, and so incredibly lucrative that it turned tiny sea snails into a currency that could buy you a palace, a standing army, or a sack of gold dust. We're going to the Swahili Coast of East Africa to see how traders turned the Indian Ocean into the world's first global bank vault. You're going to see how an economy runs on trust wind and seashells, and honestly considering how volatile crypto markets are today. You might find yourself wishing we could go back to a currency you could just pick up off a beach, though, as you'll see, it wasn't quite that simple. You probably wouldn't survive this era, by the way. If the malaria didn't get you, the Portuguese cannons, or the sheer exhaustion of rowing a dhow against the monsoon certainly would. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're rewatching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing on the shoreline of Kilwa Kisiwani, an island just off the coast of what is now southern Tanzania. The year is roughly 1331, and the first thing that hits you is the heat. It is a physical weight, a thick, humid blanket that wraps around your shoulders and refuses to let go. But almost immediately, the heat is cut by the smell. It's a complex, overwhelming perfume. The sharp, briny tang of low tide, mixing with the heavy, sweet scent of drying cloves, the smoke of mangrove wood burning in cooking fires, and the faint metallic tang of fresh blood from the fish markets. You take a step forward, your sandals sinking slightly into white sand that feels more like sugar than grit. You have to shield your eyes because the glare is intense. The sun is bouncing off the Indian Ocean, turning the water into a sheet of hammered turquoise, but it's also reflecting off the city itself. Kilwa isn't a collection of thatch huts, it is a metropolis of stone. You look up and see buildings made of coral, fossilized coral cut from the reefs, set with lime mortar and plastered white until they gleam. They rise 3, sometimes 4 stories high, with intricate arched doorways and carved wooden balconies that look like they belong in Baghdad or Damascus. Yet they are undeniably African, rooted right here in the coral bedrock. You navigate through the crowd, and it's a crush of humanity. You have to dodge a porter carrying a massive tusk of ivory on his shoulder. He does unstop for you, so you scramble out of the way, nearly tripping over a basket of chickens. The language swirling around you is a rhythmic, melodic blend. You hear the Bantu grammatical structures of the mainland fusing in real time with Arabic loanwords, a linguistic birth that is creating Swahili right in front of your ears. It's loud, it's chaotic, and it screams of money. This isn't just a trading post, this is the New York City of the medieval East African coast. In fact, the famous Moroccan traveler, Ibn Battuta, is somewhere in this crowd right now. He is visiting Kilwa around this time and will later write that it is one of the most beautiful and well-constructed towns in the world, noting the elegance of the people and their devotion to proper plumbing, which, let's be honest, is the true mark of civilization. As you push deeper into the market, you notice the fashion. The wealthy merchants here aren't wearing rough-spun cloth. You see men in fine silk robes imported from China and cottons from India, their fingers adorned with gold rings. You spot a woman directing servants, and she's wearing a necklace of carnelian beads that glow a deep, translucent orange in the sun. But look at what they are exchanging. You pause at a stall shaded by a palm frond awning. A trader from the interior, Dusty. The man from the interior puts down a small leather pouch. He opens it to reveal gold dust, glittering and heavy. The Swahili broker nods, unimpressed, and reaches into a woven basket. He doesn't pull out silver coins. He doesn't pull out copper ingots. He pulls out a handful of small Witendilo shells, Cypria moneta, cowries to your modern eye. This looks like a scam. You're watching a man trade literal gold for sea snails, but look closer at the shells. They are uniform, glossy, and hard as porcelain. The broker counts them out with a practicing rhythm clack, dropping them into groups. The trader watches like a hawk. This isn't a barter, this is a cash transaction. In this world, the shell is the dollar, the euro, and the yen wrapped into one calcium carbonate package. Historians still argue whether the ruling class here, who call themselves the Shirazi, actually have the Persian ancestry they claim, or if it's just a brilliant medieval branding exercise to legitimize their connection to the wider Islamic world. It's the medieval equivalent of buying a verified checkmark on social media. If you say you're from Shiraz, People assume you know how to handle credit. But whether their grandfathers were Persian or purely local, their business acumen is undeniable. They have built a civilization that acts as the great valve between the African interior and the Indian Ocean. You wander away from the market toward the Great Mosque of Kilwa. It's a massive structure, its roof supported by a forest of coral pillars. Nearby is the Husuni Kubwa, the Sultan's Palace. It's an architectural marvel perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. If you are invited inside, which, given your current dusty appearance, is unlikely, you'd see an octagonal swimming pool set into a courtyard. That's right, a recreational pool in the 14th century, fed by complex rainwater harvesting systems. That is the level of forget-you money we are dealing with here. But the source of this wealth isn't just the gold or the ivory. It's the system that moves it. It's the banking network that allows a merchant in Kilwa to trust a supplier in Bombay or a buyer in Cairo. And the grease in the gears of this machine is that little shell. You pick one up from a discarded pile near a warehouse. It's cool to the touch, smooth, with a serrated opening that looks like a little mouth or an eye. It feels insignificant in your palm. You could crush it with a rock if you wanted to. But this tiny object has traveled thousands of miles to get here. Because here is the kicker, the one thing that makes the economics of this entire beach make sense. Cowrie shells are not found in these waters. You look out at the ocean again, the water is teeming with life. Sure, there are plenty of shells out there, but Cyprea moneta, the specific species used for money, doesn't grow in the waters of East Africa in any significant quantity. It cannot be harvested here to get this shell. To mint this money, you have to go far, far away. You have to cross the open ocean to a chain of islands that are essentially sinking into the sea. The wind picks up, ruffling the hem of your shirt. It's the Kaskazi, the northeast monsoon, blowing in from the ocean. It smells of distant rain and open water. That wind is the engine of this world, and it's telling you it's time to move. To understand how a snail became a banknote, we have to go to the source. You drop the shell back into the sand, wipe your hands, and prepare to leave the solid coral streets of Kilwa behind. We are going to the middle of the ocean, to a place where the money literally grows on the reefs. You blink, and the heavy stone architecture of Kilwa dissolves. The imposing coral palaces and the humid crush of the African market vanish. You are now standing knee-deep in water, so clear it looks like liquid glass, surrounded by a silence so profound it actually makes your ears ring. You are in the Maldives, a chain of 26 atolls scattered like a broken pearl necklace across the Indian Ocean, about 2,500 miles northeast of where we just were. If you were a tourist here in the 21st century, you'd be looking for an overwater bungalow and a mojito. But you are a time traveler in the 14th century, and you are currently standing in the middle of the world's most bizarre mint. The water around your ankles is warm, heated by the equatorial sun, and the light reflecting off the white sand bottom is blinding. But look down. You aren't looking for fish. You are looking at bundles of coconut palm fronds floating in the shallow lagoon, anchored loosely to the seabed. They look like trash, debris left over from a storm, but they are actually sophisticated traps. You wade over to one of these floating bundles. It's been in the water for a few weeks. You grab the slimy, waterlogged wood and heave it up toward the surface. It's heavy. Clinging to the underside of the leaves, clustered in the hundreds, are tiny, glossy snails. They are about an inch long, shaped like a coffee bean or a half-closed eye, with a creamy yellow top and a white underside. This is Cyprea moneta, the money cowrie. In the grand biological scheme of things, this creature is nothing special. It grazes on algae, it moves slowly, it has the survival instinct of a rock. But because of the specific chemistry of these waters and the vast shallow lagoons of the Maldives, they proliferate here in billions. Nowhere else on Earth produces them in these quantities. You are looking at the medieval equivalent of a gold vein, except you don't need dynamite or pickaxes to mine it. You just need a palm branch and patience. You watch a local harvester woman, likely as this was often women's work, wade out to the traps. She shakes the fronds vigorously over a net or a basket. The snails, disturbed from their algae buffet, lose their grip and rain down into the container. It's almost comically easy. It's like shaking a tree and having quarters fall out. But here is where the reality of money manufacturing gets a little gross. You probably picture treasure as clean, shiny coins, crisp bills, polished ingots. But new money, Literal new cowrie money, reeks. You follow the harvester back to the shore of the small island. She doesn't take the shells to a market immediately. You can't trade a live snail. The animal inside will rot in a merchant's pocket, and nobody wants a bank account that leaks slime. So, she takes the basket to a designated pit dug into the hot sand, well away from the village huts. She dumps the living snails into the pit and buries them. And now, we wait. In the intense tropical heat, the soft tissue of the snail decomposes rapidly. It takes a few weeks for the sand and the insects to do their work, scouring the inside of the shell clean. When they are dug up later, the smell is horrific, pungent, sweet red stench that hangs over the production islands like a fog. It's the smell of liquidity. If you ever thought money was dirty, try standing downwind of a cowrie pit in August. Once the biological matter is gone, the shells are washed in the seawater. And this is where the magic happens. Unlike other shells that disintegrate or lose their color when exposed to the elements, the Cypria moneta is incredibly durable. It doesn't chip easily. It doesn't fade. After a good wash, it looks polished, shiny, and feels like smooth porcelain in your hand. It's ready to spend. Historians still argue about the level of control the Maldivian sultans exercised over this industry. Some texts suggest it was a strict royal monopoly, where every shell belonged to the crown, and stealing a handful was punishable by losing a hand. Other scholars argue that it was more of a peasant crop, where locals paid taxes in shells but were free to trade the surplus themselves. It says the difference between a Stadarin mint and a crypto mining rig in your basement. We are unentirely sure how decentralized the ledger was, but we do know the scale. We aren't talking about a few sacks of shells. We are talking about shiploads. You watch as men load the cleaned, dried cowries onto small boats that will shuttle them to the larger ocean-going dhows anchored in deeper water. They are packed into bags made of coconut fiber, each bag holding roughly 12,000 to 20,000 shells. A single ship might carry tons of this ballast that doubles as cash. It creates a strange economic paradox for the people living here. You look around the village, it's modest. The people are fishermen and palm growers. By the standards of the international market, they are literally walking on millions of dollars every day. But here, in the Maldives, the cowrie is worthless as money. You can buy a fish with a cowrie shell here. For the same reason, you can buy a sandwich with a handful of gravel in a gravel pit. Scarcity creates value, and here, there is zero scarcity. To get value, these shells have to leave. They have to travel. They need to go to places where they don't exist. You watch a transaction happening on the beach between a Maldivian elder and a Bengali merchant. The merchant has brought rice, something the Maldives can't grow enough of. He swaps sacks of rice for sacks of shells. For the Maldivian, he's trading an infinite local resource for food. For the Bengali merchant, he's buying money at a massive discount. It's the greatest arbitrage trade in history. As you stand there, holding one of the clean shells, you notice it feels heavy for its size. It's satisfying to hold. You toss it in the air and catch it. It makes a pleasing clack when it hits another shell. It's tactile, it's distinct, and unlike a copper coin, it can't be melted down or debased. You can shave the edges off a cowrie shell to steal a bit of value without ruining the whole thing. It is nature's perfect token. But why? You're probably asking yourself why sophisticated empires, kingdoms with the technology to forge, steel, and build cathedrals, would agree to base their economy on a sea snail. It seems silly, like using bottle caps in a post-apocalyptic video game. But as the sun begins to set over the atoll, turning the lagoon a fiery purple, you realize that using gold or silver is actually just as arbitrary. I mean, gold is just a shiny rock we all agreed to like because it doesn't rust. The cowrie is just the calcium carbonate version of that agreement. The wind is shifting again. The bags are loaded. The Bengali merchant is shouting orders to his crew. The ship is sitting low in the water, weighed down by millions of little deaths that are about to become the lifeblood of the African and Asian economy. You step off the pristine white sand and onto the wooden deck of the ship. We are leaving the source. We are going to follow the money. But first, we need to understand the why. Why did this specific shell conquer the world, and why, specifically, did it beat out gold in the markets of the everyday? You are sitting on a coil of rope on the deck of the ship, leaving the Maldives, and you're turning that single cowrie shell over and over in your fingers. It's small, maybe the size of your thumbnail. It's hard, it's shiny, and you are struggling to wrap your head around how this biological casing for a gastropod competed with gold and silver for dominance in the global economy. We tend to think of primitive money as clumsy. We picture giant stone wheels on the island of Yap that you can't move, or iron bars that rust, or cattle that eventually die of old age. But the cowrie wasn't a primitive stopgap. It was a sophisticated solution to a very specific economic problem. How do you buy a banana? Think about it. You are a peasant in 14th century East Africa, or India, or China. You want to buy a single fish for dinner, or a small cup of oil, or maybe a handful of grain. If the only money available is gold or silver, you are in trouble. A gold coin is worth way too much. It's like trying to buy a pack of gum with a $10,000 bill. You can't do it. You'd have to shave off a microscopic flake of gold dust, which is impossible to weigh accurately and easy to lose. Even silver coins were often too valuable for daily transactions. Enter the cowrie. It is the ultimate small change. It is the penny, the nickel, the dime of the medieval world. It allowed for microtransactions. It unlocked the economy for the poor. Suddenly, you didn't need to be a wealthy merchant to participate in the market. You could sell a single egg for a few shells. It democratized commerce in a way that precious metals never could. But it wasn't just about low value. Look at the shell in your hand again. Try to break it. Squeeze it as hard as you can. You probably can't crush it without a tool. Cypria moneta is incredibly tough. It doesn't rot like grain currency. It doesn't spoil like salt blocks. You can bury a hoard of cowries in the ground for 50 years, dig them up, wash them off, and they are good as new. This durability made it perfect for savings. If you were a farmer, you could slowly accumulate a pot of shells over a lifetime, literally burying your bank account under your floorboards, secure in the knowledge that the rats wouldn't eat your life savings. And then there's the issue of counterfeiting. You know how much effort modern governments put into anti-counterfeiting measures? Holograms, watermarks, special polymer blends. In the 14th century, counterfeiting coins was rampant. You could mix cheap lead into silver or clip the edges of coins, but you cannot counterfeit a cowrie shell. Seriously, try it. Try to carve a piece of bone or stone into this exact shape with the precise glossy enamel finish, the serrated teeth at the opening, and the specific weight. It's impossibly difficult, and even if you could do it, the labor required would cost more than the value of the shell itself. The cowrie came with a built-in security feature designed by millions of years of evolution. It was a currency that verified itself. However, there's a catch, a geographic catch. For a currency to work, its supply has to be limited. If you can just walk out your front door and pick up money from the ground, hyperinflation hits instantly, and the currency becomes worthless. This is why the cowrie worked so beautifully in East Africa, West Africa, and the interior of China. It wasn't native there. Remember the Maldives? That's the only place producing them in bulk. To get them to the Swahili Coast, you have to ship them 2,500 miles. To get them to West Africa, they have to travel even further often, across the Sahara Desert or around the Cape. This transport cost acted as a limit on the money supply. It was the proof of work for the cowrie blockchain. The difficulty of shipping them prevented the market from being flooded to isolate, maintaining their value over centuries. Historians still argue whether this system was explicitly managed by savvy traders who understood inflation, or if it was just a happy accident of geography. Did the Swahili merchants realize that restricting the supply kept the value up? Almost certainly. They were master economists. They knew that if they dumped 10 shiploads of shells onto a single village market all at once, prices would skyrocket. So, they dripped them in. They controlled the faucet. You stand up and walk to the rail of the ship. The ocean is vast and empty. You realize that the cowrie solved one other massive problem: portability. Okay, carrying 1,000,000 cowries is heavy will. Get to that, but for small amounts, they are easy. They are light, clean, and stackable. You can sew them onto clothes. You've probably seen pictures of cultural artifacts, masks or robes covered in shells. We look at that as decoration. A Swahili trader looked at that and saw a wallet. If you are wearing your wealth, it's harder to steal, and you are constantly signaling your solvency to everyone you meet. It's loud luxury in the most literal sense. You watch the wake of the ship churning white against the deep blue water. The logic holds up. It wasn't a primitive superstition. It was a rational economic choice that solved the problems of divisibility, durability, recognizability, and scarcity. It was a better dollar for the people who used it. But a currency is useless if it just sits in a hold. It needs to move. And moving anything across the Indian Ocean in the 14th century meant submitting to the most powerful force in the region. Not a king, not an emperor, but the wind. You feel the breeze stiffen against your face. The sailors are shouting, hauling on the thick coconut fiber ropes to adjust the latten sail. The massive triangular canvas snaps taut, catching the invisible river of air. The ship lurches forward, picking up speed. We are no longer drifting. We are riding the monsoon. And this wind doesn't just push ships, it determines the calendar of the entire world economy. You grab a shroud to steady yourself. You are about to learn why the Indian Ocean was the first true World Wide Web, and how waiting for the weather could make or break a fortune. You are standing on the deck of the dhow, gripping the rough, weathered wood of the gunwale as the ship pitches rhythmically into the swell. The horizon is a 360-degree ring of nothing but deep indigo water meeting a pale blue sky. For the last few weeks, this has been your entire world. But close your eyes for a second and just feel. You feel that steady, relentless pressure on your back. That isn't just a breeze, it is the kaskazi. In the modern world, we view weather as a nuisance, something that cancels flights or ruins beach days. But here, in the medieval Indian Ocean, the weather is the infrastructure. The kaskazi is the northeast monsoon, blowing reliably from November to March. It acts like a massive, invisible conveyor belt running from India and Arabia down toward the East African coast. You don't fight it, you ride it. And when the season changes, the belt reverses. The Kusi winds kick in from April to October, blowing from the south to the north, allowing you to ride the belt back home. This binary rhythm dictates everything. It decides when you leave, when you arrive, and even who you marry. Because if you miss the window, if you linger too long in Kilwa or Mombasa, negotiating a price for your ivory, the wind shifts. The conveyor belt reverses, and suddenly you are stranded. You can't sail home against the Kusi. You are stuck in Africa for months, waiting for the winds to turn again. This forced residency is actually the secret sauce of the Swahili culture. Because foreign merchants couldn't just pop in for a weekend business trip, they had to settle down. They rented houses, learned the language, and often married local women during their months-long layovers. It turned the trading ports into cosmopolitan melting pots by necessity. But right now, looking at the terrifying expanse of water, you aren't thinking about marriage. You're thinking about how fragile this vessel feels under your feet. Look down at the deck. Look closely at the seams where the wooden planks meet. You're looking for iron nails, maybe some copper rivets. You won't find them. This ship is literally sewn together. The planks of this dhow are stitched with thick, durable rope made from coconut husk fiber, known as coir. To your modern sensibilities, crossing an ocean in a boat that is essentially a giant basket seems like a suicide mission. And you're not entirely wrong, shipwrecks are common. But there is a method to this madness. The Indian Ocean is full of treacherous coral reefs and sandbars. A rigid, nailed ship that hits a reef tends to shatter. A sewn boat, however, has flex it gives. It can absorb the shock of a grounding or the twisting torque of a heavy swell without snapping apart. It is engineering born of the environment. There is also a fantastic medieval urban legend about why these boats have no nails. Arab geographers and sailors whispered stories about magnetic mountains hidden in the ocean. The legend said that if a ship with iron nails sailed too close to these mountains, the magnets would rip the nails right out of the hull, causing the ship to disintegrate instantly. It's the kind of fringe tidbit that sailors tell rookies to scare them, but it persisted in folklore for centuries even, showing up in the tales of Sinbad. The reality is probably more economic. Iron is expensive and heavy. Coconut trees are everywhere and free. You look up at the sail, it's a massive triangle, a lateen sail, billowing out like a lung. This is the engine of the trade. Historians still argue fiercely about who actually invented this sail. Did the Arabs develop it? Did they borrow it from the Polynesians? Or did the Portuguese copy it from the Arabs to invent the caravel? Regardless of who holds the patent, it is a masterpiece of aerodynamics. Unlike the square sails of the Vikings or Romans, which could only run before the wind, the latten sail acts like an airplane wing. It allows you to sail closer to the wind, giving you just enough maneuverability to navigate those tricky approaches to the harbor. But let's be honest, the romance of the age of sail wears off after about day 4. You are hot, You are sticky with salt spray, and the food is ... challenging. You watch the crew prepare a meal. It's dried fish again and hardtack, washed down with water stored in leather skins that tastes distinctly like a saddle. There is no privacy. You sleep on the deck or on top of the cargo. And remember that cargo, you are sitting on tons of cowrie shells. The smell of the slightly less chanfliklik shells in the hold is faint, but on hot days, it wafts up to remind you that you are essentially ferrying a graveyard of snails. Navigation is another act of faith. The captain isn't looking at a GPS. He's holding a small rectangular piece of wood with a string knotted at intervals, known as a kamile. At night, he holds the wood at arm's length, aligning the bottom edge with the horizon and the top edge with the pole star. By checking which knot the string touches near his nose, he can determine the latitude. It's primitive. It requires clear skies, and if he gets it wrong, you miss the island entirely and drift until you die of thirst. No pressure. You walk to the bow, stepping over a sleeping sailor. The ocean here is teeming with life in a way modern oceans often aren't. You see flying fish skittering across the surface, chased by Dorado. You might see the massive shadow of a whale shark passing beneath the hull, but mostly you see the relentless blue. It's a reminder of how brave or desperate you had to be to do this. These traders were betting their lives on the predictability of the wind. They were leveraging the seasons themselves. The ship groans as it slides down the face of a large wave. You can hear the coconut stitching, creaking, the wood flexing. It's a living sound. The dhow isn't fighting the ocean, it's moving with it. This journey from the Maldives or India to the Swahili Coast takes weeks, sometimes over a month, depending on the strength of the monsoon. It is a limbo state, suspended between two worlds, guarding a fortune in shells that are currently worthless until you make landfall. But then, the mood on the ship changes. You sense it before you see it. The sailors perk up, the captain starts shouting orders with a different intensity. The smell of the air shifts. The pure salt temps is cut by something earthier. The scent of wet soil, green leaves, and smoke. You squint at the horizon. A thin, dark line has appeared, separating the blue water from the blue sky. Africa. The wind that has been pushing you relentlessly for weeks is now driving you toward the jagged coral reefs that guard the coast. This is the most dangerous part of the journey. The deep ocean is safe. The coast is where ships die. The pilot takes his station at the bow, reading the color of the water, looking for the treacherous heads of coral that can rip the bottom out of your sewn boat. You can see the white foam breaking over the barrier reefs now. Beyond them, the calm lagoon of a harbor beckons. You see the outlines of other ships, their triangular sails folded away, masts sticking up like a forest of dead trees. You are approaching the destination. The bank vault is open. The Kaskazi has delivered you. You brace yourself against the rail as the ship begins its final approach, the crew scrambling to lower the massive yardarm. The silence of the open ocean is about to be replaced by the roar of commerce. You've survived the crossing. Now you have to survive the deal. You lean over the gunwale, your eyes stinging from weeks of salt spray, and watch the harbor of Kilwa expand from a distant smudge into a high-definition reality. If the open ocean was a desolate highway, this is rush hour in downtown Tokyo. The horizon behind you is dotted with white triangles, dozens of other dhows, all riding the same monsoon wind, all converging on this single point on the map like iron filings pulled to a magnet. The approach is terrifyingly precise. The pilot at the bow is shouting commands, his voice cracking with tension. The channel into the harbor is narrow, flanked by coral heads that are barely submerged at high tide. You look down into the water, and you can actually see them shadowy, jagged shapes rushing past the hull close enough to touch. One mistake, one missed command, and the ship's belly would be ripped open, spilling tons of cowrie shells onto the reef floor to confuse future archaeologists. But the pilot knows these waters. With a final shuddering lurch, the dhow slips past the breakwater and into the calm turquoise mirror of the lagoon. The wind, which has been roaring in your ears for weeks, is suddenly cut off by the shelter of the island. The silence is instantaneous, and then, just as quickly, it's shattered by the sound of the port. It is a cacophony. You hear the splash of anchors being dropped, the rhythmic chanting of rowers on smaller shuttle boats, and the shouting of dock workers in a dozen languages. You see flags and pennants snapping from the masts of the anchored ships. And look at the variety. It's not just the sewn boats of the Arabs and Indians. You see massive, flat-bottomed barges from the mainland, you see the distinct high-sterned vessels of the Persian Gulf. It is a parking lot for the entire medieval maritime world. Your ship drifts toward its designated spot. A customs official, yes, they had those, and yes, they were just as bureaucratic as they are today, rows out in a small skiff. He's dressed in a crisp white robe and an embroidered cap, holding a tablet of wax or parchment. He shouts up to your captain. They haggle over the docking fee. This is the first transaction of thousands that will happen here. Before a single shell is unloaded, the Sultan of Kilwa must get his cut. The tariff system here is legendary. It's the primary revenue stream for the state, funding those coral palaces and swimming pools we saw earlier. Once the bribery, the import duty is settled, you are cleared to unload. The dhow swings broadside to the shallows. Since there are no deep-water concrete piers, like in a modern port, the ship has to beach itself gently as the tide goes out, or rely on an army of porters to wade back and forth. You hop over the side into waist-deep water. It's warm and murky with the churn of sediment. You wade ashore, your legs feeling heavy and wobbly after weeks on a shifting deck. Sea legs are real, and right now, the solid ground feels like it's swaying beneath you. You stumble up the beach, and the sensory overload hits you again. The smell is distinct from the open ocean. It's the scent of wet copra, dried coconut meat, spices, unwashed bodies, and the inevitable tang of the fish market. But look at what is being unloaded. To your left, a crew is hauling off bales of cotton cloth from Gujarat in India. These textiles are vibrant indigo blues, madder reds, block-printed patterns that will eventually find their way into the fashion of the African interior. To your right, crates of Chinese porcelain are being treated with extreme care. These blue and white bowls and jars are status symbols. Owning one in Great Zimbabwe is like owning a Picasso. And then there is your ship. The crew begins to hoist the heavy sacks of cowrie shells. They thud onto the sand. Thump, thump. It's the sound of liquidity entering the market. These shells are the small change that will grease the wheels for everything else. They will pay the porters, buy the food, and settle the small debts so the big deals can happen. But who are these people? You scan the crowd. It's a United Nations of the 14th century. You see merchants from Oman with their curved daggers tucked into their belts. You see traders from the Malabar coast of India chewing betel nut that stains their mouths red. You see occasional visitors from as far away as Southeast Asia, and greeting them all are the Swahili hosts. The Swahili men here are distinct. They are the ultimate middlemen. They are dressed impeccably, often in layers of imported cloth to show off their connections. They move with a practiced ease, shaking hands, embracing old partners, switching languages. Mid-sentence, karibu, they say welcome. But it's not just politeness, it's business. You watch a reunion between your captain and a local merchant. They hug like long-lost brothers. They ask about each other's families. They invoke the blessings of God. It seems deeply personal, and it is, but it's also the foundation of a credit check. In a world without credit scores or background checks, your reputation is your only asset. If you stiff a merchant in Kilwa, the news will travel on the monsoon winds, and by next season, nobody in Calicut or Aden will do business with you. You are watching the social credit system in its original analog form. Historians debate how rigid the segregation was in these ports. Did the foreign merchants have their own quarters, like a Chinatown or a Little Italy? Archaeological evidence suggests it was fairly integrated. The stone houses of Kilwa weren't just homes, they were warehouses and hotels. A visiting merchant would often stay in the home of his local business partner. Imagine if your Airbnb host was also your stockbroker and your import-export agent. That's the Swahili model. You walk further up the beach, out of the splash zone. The sand gives way to crushed coral paths. You pass a pile of what looks like lumber, but it's heavy, black, and dense. Mangrove poles, it's a major export. The treeless desert cities of the Persian Gulf need this timber for their roofs. It's a reminder that trade goes both ways. The ships arrive full, but they must leave full to end. There, sitting in the shade of a baobab tree, is a group of men playing a board game. It looks like bao or mancalaros, of holes scooped into the earth, played with seeds or stones. It's a game of strategy, calculation, and capturing your opponent's pieces. It's a perfect metaphor for the scene around you. Everyone here is calculating. Everyone is trying to capture market share. You take a deep breath. The air is thick, hot, and full of potential. You have arrived at the nexus. The dangerous journey is over, but the complex dance of negotiation is just beginning. You are standing at the doorway to a continent, and the key to unlocking it is in those sacks of snail shells piling up on the sand. But to move those shells, you need a guide. You need someone who speaks the language of the ocean and the language of the land. You need to meet the masters of this domain. You are standing at the edge of the marketplace, watching the chaotic symphony of unloading cargo when a hand lands gently on your shoulder. You spin around, defensive, hand instinctively going to your money pouch. But the man standing there isn't a thief. He's smiling, his expression one of practiced warmth. He is dressed in a flowing white kanzua long roband, a beautifully embroidered kofia cap. He gestures toward the shade of a nearby coralstone veranda. "Karibu," he says again. "Welcome. You look like you've swallowed half the ocean. Come, sit." You'd have just met a Swahili broker. In the historical records, they are often just footnotes, overshadowed by the flashy sultans or the daring foreign explorers. But make no mistake, this guy is the CEO, the translator, the cultural diplomat, and the real estate agent of the Indian Ocean trade, all rolled into one. Without him, the global economy stops dead in its tracks. You follow him into the cool shadow of the building. The temperature drops instantly. He claps his hands and a servant appears with a tray. On it are small cups of spiced coffee kahawa scented with cardamom and ginger, and a plate of halwa, a sweet, gelatinous confection. This isn't just hospitality. This is the first step of the negotiation. In the Swahili world, you do not discuss business until you have broken bread door. In this case, sipped coffee. To rush is to be rude, and to be rude is to lose money. As you sip the bitter, spicy coffee, you study your host. He is likely bilingual, trilingual, or even quadrilingual. He speaks Swahili as his mother tongue, Arabic as the language of faith and law, maybe Gujarati to talk to the Indian textile merchants, and perhaps a bit of Persian. He is the human interface between the African interior and the Asian maritime world. Think about the logistical nightmare of this trade. A merchant from the interior brings gold or ivory. He speaks a Bantu dialect and follows traditional African religious customs. A merchant from Oman brings carpets and dates. He speaks Arabic and follows Islam. They have no common language, no common legal framework, and no reason to trust each other. The broker is the bridge. He translates not just the words, but the concepts. He explains the value of the porcelain to the ivory hunter and the quality of the tusk to the carpet seller. But his job goes deeper than just talk. He provides the infrastructure. Where does the foreign merchant sleep for the 4 months he's stuck here waiting for the winds to change? In the broker's house, where does he store his goods? In the broker's warehouse, who vouches for him if he gets into a legal dispute? The broker. Historians often debate the nature of this relationship. Was it exploitative? Did the brokers fleece the foreigners? Probably a little, but it was symbiotic. The foreign merchants needed a local patron to navigate the complex social web of the city. In exchange, the broker took a commission a slice of every deal. And since the deals were massive, the commissions were astronomical. You watch as your host greets another arrival, a man who looks like he's just walked out of the bush, dusty and leaning on a spear. This is a caravan leader from the mainland. Your host switches demeanor instantly. The formal Arabic greetings are replaced by a more colloquial Bantu exchange. He asks about the rains inland, about the health of the chief, about the dangers of the road. He is gathering intelligence. Is there a war brewing in the interior that will cut off the supply of gold? Is there a drought that will make food expensive? Information is the most valuable commodity he trades. He turns back to you, his eyes twinkling. The sea brings the guests, he says, but the land brings the dinner. It's a proverb reminding you that for all the glamour of the ships, the wealth comes from the hard, dangerous work of the interior. He picks up a cowrie shell from a small bowl on the table. It's a tester, a sample. He inspects it, checking the gloss, the weight, the money of the sea, he muses. Useless to eat, useless to wear, but it buys men. This is where the broker's power really lies. He understands the conversion rates. He knows exactly how many shells equal a mythful of gold dust today. He knows that the exchange rate in Kilwa is different from the rate in Mombasa or Mogadishu. He is an arbitrage trader. He buys low here, advises his clients to sell high there, and skims the profit. You look around the veranda. It's lined with stone benches covered in woven mats. This is the office. No desks, no computers, just men sitting cross-legged. talking in low voices, passing beads or shells back and forth. It looks relaxed, but the stakes are life and death. A bad deal here means ruin. A misunderstanding could lead to a blood feud. The broker manages these tensions with a smile and a cup of coffee. He gestures to the open doorway, framing the bustling street outside. "My father built this house," he tells you. "His father built the one next to it. We do not move. The ships come and go, but we remain." This stability is key. The foreign merchants are transients. The Swahili are the bedrock. They built these stone towns to be permanent fixtures, signals of endurance to the world. "You can leave your gold with me," the stone walls say. "I will be here when you come back next year." As the sun climbs higher, the heat outside becomes oppressive, but inside the thick coral walls, it remains pleasant. You realize that the architecture itself is a tool of trade. It's designed to keep the merchandise cool and the merchants comfortable. It's a physical manifestation of the broker's role, a shelter from the harsh elements of the world. Your host stands up. The pleasantries are over. The coffee is finished. Now, the real work begins. He signals to a porter to bring in the samples. He wants to see the quality of the cloth you brought, or the grain, or the beads. His eyes sharpen. The friendly host vanishes, replaced by the shrewd negotiator. He points to a flaw in the weaving. He tuts disapproval at the color of the dye. He is devaluing your product before he even makes an offer. You smile. You expected this. You counter, pointing out the rarity of the indigo, the tightness of the thread. He laughs, appreciating the pushback. This is the dance. It's a game they have been playing on this coast for 1,000 years. And as you haggle, you hear the faint clack-clack of cowrie shells being counted in the back room. It is the soundtrack of the Swahili Coast. The broker is the conductor, and the entire Indian Ocean economy is his orchestra. But to understand where all this wealth goes, you need to step out of his office and look at the city he and his ancestors built. You need to see the stone town not just as a market, but as a masterpiece of urban engineering. You step out of the broker's office and back into the blinding glare of the street. If you thought the market was impressive, the city itself is a revelation. You are walking through a stone town, a term that sounds quaint until you realize the sheer geological effort required to build it. You run your hand along the rough, pitted surface of a wall. It scratches your palm. This isn't brick fired in a kiln. This is the ocean repurposed. This is coral rag. To build these multi-story mansions, the Swahili masons didn't quarry mountains. They quarried the reef. They would wait for low tide, cut blocks of living coral from the seabed while it was still wet and relatively soft, and drag it ashore. Once the coral dries in the sun, it hardens into a rock that is incredibly durable but full of tiny air pockets. These pockets make the stone an excellent insulator. While the sun is baking the exterior to a crisp 95 degrees, the interior remains cool. It's prehistoric air conditioning. But the construction doesn't stop there. To stick these blocks together, they needed mortar. So, they took more coral, piled it onto massive bonfires of mangrove wood, and burned it until it crumbled into a fine white powder. Mix that with sand and water, and you get a plaster that dries white and hard. The result is a city that gleams like a set of bleached bones against the dark green of the tropics. It is beautiful, but it is also a blinding headache if you forget your sunglasses. You navigate the streets, and navigate is the right word. There is no grid system here. The alleys wind and twist like a spilled coil of rope. You might think this is just poor urban planning, a result of houses being plopped down at random over centuries. You would be wrong. This maze is a deliberate climate control system. The streets are intentionally narrow and winding to ensure there is never a direct line of sight for the sun to hit the ground for long. Shade is constant. Furthermore, the twisting paths funnel the ocean breeze, accelerating it through the gaps between buildings. You turn a corner, and whoosh, a gust of cool air hits you, funneling down the alleyway. It's brilliant engineering disguised as chaos. You stop in front of a particularly imposing doorway. It's made of heavy, dark teak wood, studded with brass spikes. These doors are the Instagram bio of the medieval Swahili merchant. Before a house is even built, the doorframe is erected. It tells the neighborhood everything they need to know about the owner, his wealth, his family lineage, and his trade connections. Here in Kilwa, the risk of a rogue elephant charge is low, but the message is clear. My wealth is impregnable. The door is slightly ajar, and you catch a glimpse of the interior. It's a courtyard house. The noise of the street vanishes the moment you step across the threshold. Inside, it's a sanctuary. A central courtyard open to the sky catches the rain and lets the heat escape. Surrounding it are long, narrow rooms known as vidaka. And here is the ultimate flex, the thing that truly separates the civilized Swahili merchant from the barbarians of medieval Europe. Plumbing. You walk past a doorway and see a dedicated washroom. We are talking about stone latrines with drainage channels leading to soakaway pits dug deep into the sandy soil. While the kings of England and France are currently using chamber pots and tossing the contents out the window, the merchants of Kilwa are washing their feet in designated cisterns and enjoying sophisticated sanitation. Ibn Battuta wasn't joking when he praised the cleanliness of the city. In a tropical climate where disease can wipe out a family in a week, hygiene isn't just a luxury, it's a survival strategy. Historians still debate the exact social structure of these stone towns. Were they exclusively for the wealthy nobility, or was there a more mixed population? The prevailing theory is a dual city model. The stone houses, the mji, were for the permanent, wealthy elite. Surrounding this stone core, spreading out for miles, would have been the mud and thatch suburbs where the sailors, porters, slaves, and poorer artisans lived. The stone city was an exclusive country club that you lived in. If your house could melt in the rain, you weren't part of the board of directors. You walked deeper into the elite district. The wealth on display is staggering. You see niches carved into the walls of the reception rooms, zidaka designed specifically to display imported porcelain. It's a literal wall of fame. Look, the wall says, I have celadon from the Song dynasty. I have blue and white from the Yuan. I have bowls that traveled 6,000 miles to hold my mangoes. But this architecture serves another purpose. It is a bank vault. Remember, there are no electronic transfers. Your wealth is physical. It is piles of ivory, chests of gold dust, and sacks of cowrie shells. You can't leave that in a wooden shack. You need stone walls, heavy doors, and a roof that won't catch fire. The house protects the capital. As you wander, you notice something odd: the mosques. There are many of them, small neighborhood mosques built of the same coral rag. But look at the great mosque of Kilwa again. It has domes. Building a dome with coral rag is a nightmare. The stone is too heavy and irregular. Yet, they did it. They used lighter, porous coral for the vaults and mixed their mortar with amazing precision. It's a testament to the mathematical skill of the local builders, who blended Persian engineering concepts with African materials to create something unique. You reach the edge of the stone town. The white walls end abruptly. Beyond lies the country of the Zanzibar, the mainland. The view shifts from the orderly, geometric shadows of the city to the organic, chaotic green of the bush. You turn back to look at the city one last time. From here, it looks like a fortress floating on the water. It is a civilization that has turned its back on the continent to face the ocean. Its eyes are fixed on India, Arabia, and China. It is an outlier, a pearl set on the edge of a vast, dark forest. But that forest is where the money comes from. The coral palaces, the silk robes, the porcelain bowls, none of it exists without the goods that come from behind you. The ocean brings the buyers, but the interior brings the product. You can't be a middleman if you ignore the middle. You feel a shift in the energy. The wind is still blowing from the ocean, but the smell coming from the land is different. It's the smell of wood smoke and red dust. The traders in the stone town are just the final link in a chain that stretches thousands of miles inland. To understand the true value of those cowrie shells, we have to leave the comfort of the plumbing and the shade. We have to turn around and face the path that leads into the heart of the continent. The caravans are waiting. And unlike the smooth sailing of the dhows, the journey inland is a grind. It's time to swap your sandals for boots. We are going You take one last look at the Indian Ocean, sparkling like a promise behind you, and then you turn around. The cool breeze of the Kaskazi dies instantly, blocked by the dense wall of coastal scrub. The smell of salt is replaced by the scent of dry earth, crushed grass, and the resinous temps of acacia trees. You are leaving the cosmopolitan world of the Swahili Coast and entering the hinterland, a word that historians love to use to describe the thousands of miles of continent that supplied the coast. But don't picture a road. There are no Roman highways here, no paved stones. You are looking at a narrow, beaten track, barely wide enough for two men to walk abreast. It snakes away into the green gloom of the coastal forest, disappearing into the vastness of the interior. This is the pipeline. This faint scratch in the dirt is the artery that connects the gold fields of the interior to the banks of Bombay and the palaces of China. And notice something missing. Listen, you hear the buzzing of insects, the call of birds, the rustle of leaves. But you don't hear the clip-clop of horses' hooves. You don't hear the braying of donkeys or the groan of ox cart wheels. The silence is heavy. This is the tsetse fly curtain. It is one of the most significant, yet overlooked, geographical borders in human history. The coastal strip and much of the interior is infested with Glossina, the tsetse fly. To you, it's a painful bite that might give you sleeping sickness. To a horse, a donkey, or an ox, it is a death sentence. The fly carries trypanosomiasis, which wipes out draft animals with ruthless efficiency. This biological barrier meant that for centuries, the wheel was useless here, not because people didn't know how to make one, but because there was no engine to pull it. So the engine is human. You watch a caravan forming up on the outskirts of Kilwa. It is a column of men, sometimes numbering in the hundreds. They are porters, the pagazi, and what they are doing is a feat of physical endurance that makes an Ironman triathlon look like a light jog. Each man lifts a load of roughly 60 to 70 pounds. He balances it on his head, sometimes on a small woven pad. And then he walks. He walks for lunch. You fall in line with them, though you are wisely not carrying anything. The pace is relentless, a steady, rhythmic stride that eats up the miles. The caravan operates like a moving army. At the front is the kairongozi, the guide and lead porter, usually dressed in animal skins and carrying the flag or the insignia of the caravan. He sets the pace. If he stops, everyone stops. If he runs, everyone runs. Historians still argue fiercely about the social status of these early porters. Were they enslaved people forced to march, or were they professional unionized laborers? The answer, as usual, is a messy both. In the later 19th century, the trade became heavily reliant on enslaved labor. But in this earlier medieval period, there is strong evidence of professional porter guilds. These were men who took immense pride in their strength, who negotiated their wages in cowrie shells and cloth, and who could sing songs mocking their employers if the food was bad. But free or forced, the work is brutal. You watch a man carrying an elephant tusk. It's a massive, curved piece of calcified dentine, 6 feet long, weighing perhaps 80 pounds. It is awkward. It throws off his center of gravity. He has to constantly adjust his neck muscles to compensate for the sway. He will carry this tusk through mangrove swamps, where the mud sucks at his ankles. He will carry it up the rocky escarpments of the Rift Valley. He will carry it through lion country, sleeping in a circle of thorny brush at night, with a fire kept high to deter predators. And what is he getting in return? What is flowing the other way? You look at the loads moving inland. Sacks of salt more valuable than gold in some interior regions. Bales of the Indian cotton cloth we saw on the docks. And, of course, heavy bags of Cyprea moneta. The cowrie shell is traveling to its final destination. This journey gives you a new appreciation for the concept of markup. When a piece of ivory reaches Kilwa, it costs a fortune not just because ivory is rare, but because a human being had to balance it on his skull for 600 miles. The transport costs are astronomical. As the days turn into weeks, the landscape changes. The humidity of the coast fades. You climb higher onto the plateau. The air gets thinner, drier. You pass through villages that serve as way stations. Here, the caravan pauses to trade. And this is where you see the cowrie shell at work in its most potent form. The caravan leader needs food for 200 men. He can't hunt enough to feed them all without slowing down. So, he approaches the local village headman. He doesn't offer a promissory note. He opens a sack and counts out shells. For the villagers here, far from the ocean, these shells are exotic. They are jewels from a world they have never seen. They are consistent, durable, and magically uniform. A chicken costs 20 shells. A goat might be 500. The inflation rate changes with every mile you walk away from the coast. The further inland you go, the scarcer the shell, and the higher its purchasing power. By the time you reach the deep interior, a handful of these sea snails can buy you a cow. This gradient, the increasing value of the cowrie as it travels inland, is what drives the trade. It's an economic pump. The Swahili traders pump shells in, and the vacuum pressure pulls the ivory and gold out. But it's not just commerce. It's a cultural infection. You notice that the people in these interior villages are wearing the shells. A woman passes you with a strand of cowries woven into her hair. A warrior has them sewn onto his leather apron. They are becoming talismans. They represent the power of the distant ocean, the power of the white men, the Arabs and Swahili who come with cloth and beads. The currency is embedding itself into the ritual life of the continent. You are tired, your feet are blistered. You have swatted away enough tsetse flies to last a lifetime, but the caravan presses on. The leader is looking for something specific. He isn't just wandering, he is heading for the great centers of power in the south. He is heading toward the smoke that thunders. He is heading toward the kingdoms that control the gold. You crest a ridge and look out over a vast savanna, the grass golden in the afternoon light. In the distance, you see the smoke of many fires. You are approaching a settlement that defies the colonial myth that Africa had no great civilizations. You are approaching a city of stone, but not coral stone. Granite. The porters straighten their backs. They adjust their loads. They start to sing a deep, rhythmic chant that helps them synchronize their steps. They know they are close to the payout. They are walking toward the source of the gold that will end up in the crown of a European king or the earring of an Indian Roni. But to get it, they have to trade with the Shona kings. You realize that the middle of nowhere is actually the center of somewhere very important. You are about to enter the court of the Great Zimbabwe, or at least one of its powerful tributaries. And here, the cowrie shell faces its biggest test. Can a snail shell really buy the heavy yellow metal that the rest of the world kills for? You wipe the sweat from your forehead. The coast feels like a dream now. The ocean is a memory. Here the earth is red, the sky is vast, and the business is raw. The caravan halts, the leader signals. It's time to open the market. You are standing before a wall. But this isn't the jagged white coral rag of Kilwa. This is granite. It is gray, stern, and imposing. And the craftsmanship is unnerving. You run your hand over the cool stone blocks. There is no mortar here, no lime, no cement, no mud. These millions of stones have been shaped and stacked with such terrifying geometric precision that they hold themselves up through sheer friction and gravity. You have arrived at Great Zimbabwe, or perhaps one of its major satellite cities like Mapungabu or Kami. The name Zimbabwe literally translates from Shona as houses of stone, Jimba Dizimab, and you can see why. In a landscape defined by wood and thatch, this place screams of permanence and power. You look up at the great enclosure. Its walls soar over 30 feet high, curving in a way that feels organic, like a granite snake curling around the hilltop. You follow the caravan leader through a narrow, defensible entrance. The air inside is cooler, shadowed by the looming masonry. You are entering the court of the elite, the ancestors of the modern Shona people. The atmosphere is heavy with ritual. You can smell wood smoke and the faint metallic tangs of iron being forged nearby. But you aren't here for iron. You are ushered into a clearing where the trading will happen. The local officials are draped in cotton cloth, the very cloth your caravan broadened, adorned with heavy copper bangles. But look at what they bring out to the mats. They aren't carrying sacks of grain. They are carrying small leather pouches, porcupine quills filled with dust, and sometimes raw nuggets the size of walnuts, gold. This is the moment where the modern brain short-circuits. You watch the Swahili trader open his sack of cowrie shells. He pours a pile of sea snails onto the mat. The local official pours a pile of yellow metal next to it. And then they swap. To you, this looks like the heist of the millennium. You want to grab the Swahili trader by the shoulders and scream. You are trading sea trash for the global standard of wealth. But you have to shut off your 21st century brain and look at this through the eyes of a 14th century Shona king. To the people of the interior, gold is fine. It's pretty. It doesn't rust, but it's also useless. You can't make a spear out of it. It bends. You can't make a hoe out of it. It breaks. It's a soft, heavy yellow rock that is reasonably abundant in the local riverbeds. It has no intrinsic utility, but the cowrie is magic. It comes from a place they have never seen. The Nyanja, the great endless water. It is white like the spirits of the ancestors. It is shaped like a female reproductive organ, symbolizing fertility and life. It is hard, durable, and impossibly uniform. In the interior, the cowrie is a diamond. It is a piece of the divine. This is the double coincidence of wants playing out on a global scale. The Swahili trader thinks he is ripping off the Shona king by giving him shells for gold. The Shona king thinks he is ripping off the Swahili trader by giving him soft yellow rocks for jewels. Both sides walk away thinking they won the lottery. This mutual delusion is the engine that built the medieval world. Historians still argue about the exact volume of gold that left Africa during this period. Some estimates suggest that at its peak, the gold fields of the Zimbabwe plateau were supplying nearly half of the gold circulating in the Eastern Hemisphere. Think about that. The gold in the coins of medieval London, the gold in the jewelry of a Venetian duchess. The gold leaf on a Quran in Baghdad there is a very high statistical probability that it started right here. Traded for a pile of snails on a woven mat in southern Africa. Getty Images, KHM-PHU, watch the weighing process. It's tense. The Swahili have brought their own scales, delicate brass balances. They use seeds as counterweights. Often the red and black seeds of the Abrus precatorius vine, known as rosary peas, they are remarkably consistent in weight, the carrot of the bush. The gold dust is poured out, measured against the seeds, and then the payment is counted out in shells. The logistics of this are mind-boggling. We aren't talking about a pocket full of shells. To buy a significant amount of gold, you need thousands of cowries, the porters you walked with. They are now loading up with gold, ivory, and sometimes rhinoceros horn. The shells stay here, and they stay here literally. Archaeologists excavating these sites have found caches of cowrie shells that number in the tens of thousands. They were hoarded. They were buried in the floors of huts as a spiritual foundation. They were used to decorate the famous soapstone birds found in the ruins. The shell didn't just buy goods, it bought prestige. But there is a darker quirk to this trade. You might notice that the walls of Great Zimbabwe are entirely devoid of military fortifications. In the traditional sense, there are no arrow slits, no murder holes. Some scholars argue that these walls weren't built to keep armies out, but to keep the cattle in or simply to screen the elite from the view of the commoners. It was a privacy fence made of 1 million tons of granite. It suggests a trade network that, for a long time, was surprisingly peaceful. The exchange was so profitable for everyone that war was bad for business. However, the silence of the stone ruins can be misleading. You see a group of men tending a fire near the king's enclosure. They are processing the gold. They crush the quartz or pan the dust and melt it into small beads or ingots for easier transport. The smoke is thick, the labor is hard. And while the elite are draping themselves in imported silk and hoarding cowries, the miners are living short, brutal lives in narrow shafts. Digging the wealth out of the earth by candlelight, you walk over to the edge of the plateau and look back the way you came. The path to the coast is long, but now, the logic of the whole system clicks into place. The Maldivi Islanders harvest the shell's free resource. The Swahili traders transport the shell's shipping cost. The African interior kings exchange gold for shell's value arbitrage. The Swahili take the gold to India and Arabia to buy spices and cloth. The Europeans eventually buy the spices and gold with, well, usually silver or violence. It is a perfect circle. And right in the center, facilitating the jump from local commodity to international treasure, is the cowrie. The caravan is preparing to leave. The mood is lighter now. The heavy sacks of shells are gone, replaced by the much denser but compact packages of gold and the awkward tusks of ivory. The return journey is downhill literally as you descend from the plateau to the coast, but also economically. You are carrying the profit home, but as you look at the pile of cowries left behind on the mat, gleaming white against the red African soil, you realize something profound. Money is a fiction. It's a story we tell each other. The gold is only valuable because the Swahili say it is. The shells are only valuable because the Shona say they are. If either side stopped believing the story, the whole network would collapse instantly. But in the 14th century, the story is strong. The belief is unshakable. And as you turn to follow the porters back toward the ocean, you are following a stream of wealth that will fuel the Renaissance, build empires, and eventually attract the attention of men with very different ideas about how trade should work. For now, though, the gold is secured. The deal is done. But when this gold reaches Kilwa, it can't just be thrown in a pile. It has to be accounted for. It has to be divided. And that means we need to go back to the coast to learn the lost art of banking without banks. We need to learn how to count. You watch the dust of that pulverized cowrie settle on the counting house floor, and a disturbing realization creeps in. You are used to money being abstract numbers on a screen, or maybe a piece of cotton paper blend that can survive a trip through the washing machine. But here, money is biological. It is brittle, and under the wrong conditions, it can literally cease to exist. We talked about how durable the cowrie is compared to grain or salt, and that's true. But let's look at the catastrophic failure modes of a calcium carbonate economy. You step out of the counting house and walk toward a warehouse near the docks. The air here smells of burnt wood. There was a fire recently, a common occurrence in a world lit by oil lamps and built with timber roofs. You look at the ruins of a merchant's storehouse. The coral walls are scorched but standing, but look at the floor. It's covered in a fine white powder. This isn't ash, this is money. Here is your science lesson for the night. Cowrie shells are made of calcium carbonate. When you heat calcium carbonate to about 900 degrees Celsius, temperature easily reached in a raging building, a chemical reaction occurs. It calcines, it releases carbon dioxide, and turns into calcium oxide cow, commonly known as quicklime. So, if your house burns down, you don't just lose your roof, you lose your life savings. Your bank vault does just melt into a lump of gold that you can recover and recast later. It chemically transforms into the primary ingredient for mortar. Imagine sifting through the ashes of your home, hoping to find your retirement fund and realizing it has turned into industrial plaster. You can't spend it. You can only use it to build a new wall. It is the ultimate financial tragedy. Your liquid assets becoming literal building materials. But fire isn't the only enemy. There is a subtler, more insidious threat lurking in the sacks of shells arriving from the ocean. It's the threat of the imposter. You walk back to the market, where a dispute is breaking out. A local trader is shouting at a supplier, dumping a handful of shells onto the ground in disgust. You lean in to see what the problem is. The shells look fine to you. They are small, white, and shell-shaped. But pick one up. Look closely at the top. The classic money cowrie cypria, moneta, is yellow-white and shaped like a jagged lozenge. But this shell in your hand is rounder, smoother, and has a distinct orange-gold ring on its back. This is cypria annulus ring cowrie. To an untrained eye, they are nearly identical. To a Swahili merchant, the difference is between a crisp $100 bill and a Monopoly banknote sketched in crayon. Cypria annulus is the ugly cousin of the money cowrie. It is more common in East African waters. You can sometimes find them on the local beaches, unlike moneta, which breaks the rule of scarcity. Because they are easier to find, they are worth less. Much less, the introduction of cypria annulus into a sack of cypria moneta is the medieval equivalent of debasing the currency. It's cutting the pure product with cheap filler. Historians still argue about how these two currencies interacted. In some centuries and some regions, annulus was accepted as small change or a lower denomination. In others, it was strictly banned. There are records of merchants flat out refusing to accept shipments that were contaminated with the ring cowrie. It creates a logistical nightmare. Imagine having to manually inspect 50,000 coins to make sure none of them are the wrong vintage. You watch the trader furiously sorting the pile. He is flicking the bad ring cowries aside with a speed born of rage. It's a tedious, eye-straining process known as garbling. If you are a foreign merchant and you try to pass off a sack of mixed shells as pure Maldives, you will ruin your reputation instantly. You are trying to pay with counterfeit crypto and the blockchain these guys. He's just rejected the transaction. And then there is the problem of the container. You can't just pile millions of shells loose in a room. They slide everywhere like a liquid. You have to bag them. But in the 14th century, there is no plastic. The bags are made of woven palm matting or gunny cloth. You walk into the back of a storage depot. The smell of rot is faint but present. In the humid, salty air of the coast, organic fibers disintegrate. You see a stack of shell bags in the corner that have been sitting there for 5 years. The bottom bag has rotted through. The weight of the shells above has burst the seam, and a slow avalanche of money is spilling out into the dirt. This leads to a bizarre maintenance cost for wealth. You have to rotate your stock. Every few years, you have to pay workers to rebag your money. If you don't, you end up with a mixed pile of shells and rotten fiber that is impossible to transport. It's like having a bank account that slowly eats the wallet you keep it in. But let's talk about the psychological weight of this fragility. You are standing in a society where your status is defined by physical accumulation. If you are rich, you literally take up more space. A poor man's wealth fits in a pouch. A rich man's wealth fills a warehouse. This makes you a target. In a gold economy, you can sew your wealth into the hem of your cloak and run if the city is attacked. You can hide a diamond in your cheek. But here, if the enemy is at the gates, you can't run with your money. You can't carry 10 tons of shells. You are anchored to your hoard. This creates a distinct geopolitical stability. The merchant elite of Kilwa and Mombasa tend to avoid war because they are physically incapable of fleeing with their capital. They are all in on the city's defense because the alternative is total bankruptcy. It forces a kind of pacifism born of logistical incompetence. You negotiate, you pay tribute, you marry off your daughters, anything to avoid having to move the pile. You wander down to the water's edge to clear your head. The tide is coming in, covering the sharp coral. You skip a flat stone across the surface. It sinks. The fragility of the system is terrifying when you think about it too hard. It relies on a specific snail breeding, in a specific archipelago, transported by a specific wind, accepted by a specific interior culture, and managed by a specific coastal elite. If any one of those links snaps, if the snails die off, if the winds shift, if the Shona stop liking white shells, the whole thing evaporates. But for now, the system holds. The clack-clack-clack of the counting houses continues. The ships keep arriving. And speaking of ships, you notice something on the horizon. It isn't the usual dhow. You squint. The shape is wrong. It's too big, way too big. The sails aren't the familiar white triangles of the Arab vessels. They are rectangular, pleated like fans, and dark red. And there isn't just one, there are dozens. The horizon is filling with a wooden mountain range. You feel a vibration in the ground, a low rumble that might just be your own heart starting to race. The locals on the beach stop what they are doing. The chatter dies. The counting stops. You are about to witness the single most impressive projection of maritime power in human history before the industrial age. The Dragon Fleet is here. And if you thought the Swahili merchants were rich, you are about to see what empire looks like when it decides to go shopping. You watch the dust of that pulverized cowrie settle on the counting house floor, and a disturbing realization creeps in. You are used to money being abstract numbers on a screen, or maybe a piece of cotton paper blend that can survive a trip through the washing machine. But here, money is biological. It is brittle, and under the wrong conditions, it can literally cease to exist. We talked about how durable the cowrie is compared to grain or salt, and that's true. But let's look at the catastrophic failure modes of a calcium carbonate economy. You step out of the counting house and walk toward a warehouse near the docks. The air here smells of burnt wood. There was a fire recently, a common occurrence in a world lit by oil lamps and built with timber roofs. You look at the ruins of a merchant's storehouse. The coral walls are scorched but standing, but look at the floor. It's covered in a fine white powder. This isn't ash, this is money. Here is your science lesson for the night. Cowrie shells are made of calcium carbonate, CuCO3. When you heat calcium carbonate to about 900 degrees Celsius, a temperature easily reached in a raging building fire, chemical reaction occurs. It calcines, it releases carbon dioxide and turns into calcium oxide cow, commonly known as quicklime. So, if your house burns down, you don't just lose your roof, you lose your life savings. Your bank vault does unjust melt into a lump of gold that you can recover and recast later. It chemically transforms into the primary ingredient for mortar. Imagine sifting through the ashes of your home, hoping to find your retirement fund, and realizing it is turned into industrial plaster. You can't spend it. You can only use it to build a new wall. It is the ultimate financial tragedy. Your liquid assets becoming literal building materials. But fire isn't the only enemy. There is a subtler, more insidious threat lurking in the sacks of shells arriving from the ocean. It's the threat of the imposter. You walk back to the market, where a dispute is breaking out. A local trader is shouting at a supplier, dumping a handful of shells onto the ground in disgust. You lean in to see what the problem is. The shells look fine to you. They are small, white, and shell-shaped. But pick one up. Look closely at the top. The classic money cowrie, Cypria moneta, is yellow-white and shaped like a jagged lozenge. But this shell in your hand is rounder, smoother, and has a distinct orange-gold ring on its back. This is Cypria annulus ring cowrie. To an untrained eye, they are nearly identical. To a Swahili merchant, The difference is between a crisp $100 bill and a Monopoly banknote sketched in crayon. Cypria annulus is the ugly cousin of the money cow. It is more common in East African waters. You can sometimes find them on the local beaches. Unlike moneta, which breaks the rule of scarcity, because they are easier to find, they are worth less. Much less, the introduction of Cypria annulus into a sack of Cypria moneta is the medieval equivalent of debasing the currency. It's cutting the pure product with cheap filler. Historians still argue about how these two currencies interacted. In some centuries and some regions, annulus was accepted as small change or a lower denomination. In others, it was strictly banned. There are records of merchants flat out refusing to accept shipments that were contaminated with the ring cowrie. It creates a logistical nightmare. Imagine having to manually inspect 50,000 coins to make sure none of them are the wrong vintage. You watch the trader furiously sorting the pile. He is flicking the bad ring cowries aside with a speed born of rage. It's a tedious, eye-straining process known as garbling. If you are a foreign merchant and you try to pass off a sack of mixed shells as pure Maldives, you will ruin your reputation instantly. You are trying to pay with counterfeit crypto, and the blockchain these guys, just rejected the transaction. And then there is the problem of the container. You can't just pile millions of shells loose in a room. They slide everywhere like a liquid. You have to bag them. But in the 14th century, there is no plastic. The bags are made of woven palm matting or gunny cloth. You walk into the back of a storage depot. The smell of rot is faint but present in the humid, salty air of the coast. Organic fibers disintegrate. You see a stack of shell bags in the corner that have been sitting there for 5 years. The bottom bag has rotted through. The weight of the shells above has burst the seam, and a slow avalanche of money is spilling out into the dirt. This leads to a bizarre maintenance cost for wealth. You have to rotate your stock. Every few years, you have to pay workers to rebag your money. If you don't, you end up with a mixed pile of shells and rotten fiber that is impossible to transport. It's like having a bank account that slowly eats the wallet you keep it in. But let's talk about the psychological weight of this fragility. You are standing in a society where your status is defined by physical accumulation. If you are rich, you literally take up more space. A poor man's wealth fits in a pouch. A rich man's wealth fills a warehouse. This makes you a target. In a gold economy, you can sew your wealth into the hem of your cloak and run if the city is attacked. You can hide a diamond in your cheek, but here, if the enemy is at the gates, you can't run with your money. You can't carry 10 tons of shells. You are anchored to your hoard. This creates a distinct geopolitical stability. The merchant elite of Kilwa and Mombasa tend to avoid war because they are physically incapable of fleeing with their capital. They are all in on the city's defense because the alternative is total bankruptcy. It forces a kind of pacifism born of logistical incompetence. You negotiate, you pay tribute, you marry off your daughters, anything to avoid having to move the pile. You wander down to the water's edge to clear your head. The tide is coming in, covering the sharp coral. You skip a flat stone across the surface. It sinks. The fragility of the system is terrifying when you think about it too hard. It relies on a specific snail breeding, in a specific archipelago, transported by a specific wind, accepted by a specific interior culture, and managed by a specific coastal elite. If any one of those links snaps sift, the snails die off. If the winds shift, if the Shona stop liking white shells, the whole thing evaporates. But for now, the system holds. The clack-lack-lack of the counting houses continues. The ships keep arriving. And speaking of ships, you notice something on the horizon. It isn't the usual dhow. You squint. The shape is wrong. It's too big, way too big. The sails aren't the familiar white triangles of the Arab vessels. They are rectangular, pleated like fans, and dark red. And there isn't just one, there are dozens. The horizon is filling with a wooden mountain range. You feel a vibration in the ground, a low rumble that might just be your own heart starting to race. The locals on the beach stop what they are doing. The chatter dies. The counting stops. You are about to witness the single most impressive projection of maritime power in human history before the industrial age. The Dragon Fleet is here. And if you thought the Swahili merchants were rich, you are about to see what empire looks like when it decides to go shopping. You stand frozen on the beach, your mouth slightly open because your brain is refusing to process the scale of what is approaching the harbor. You've spent weeks marveling at the dhows, those nimble, sewn vessels that dance with the wind. But these are not ships, they are floating mountains. You are witnessing the arrival of the Ming Dynasty's treasure fleet, commanded by the legendary Admiral Zheng He. The year is likely around 1418, during the 5th or 6th of his great voyages. The ship leading the formation, the Beoshunese, terrifyingly huge. Historical records suggest these behemoths were up to 400 feet long and 160 feet wide. To put that in perspective, you could park the entirety of Columbus' Santa Maria on the main deck of this ship and still have room to play a game of soccer around it. It has 9 masts, staggered to catch the wind from every conceivable angle, flying sails made of red silk that shimmer like blood in the sun. And it's not just one ship, it's a flotilla. There are supply ships, water tankers, yes, they brought their own water, troop transports carrying thousands of soldiers, and patrol boats. The population of this fleet is nearly 30,000 men. That is larger than the entire population of the city of Kilwa itself. The Swahili Coast isn't just receiving visitors, it's being visited by a moving metropolis. As the lead ship drops anchor, a massive iron beast that splashes down with the force of a falling building, you expect an invasion. You expect soldiers to swarm the beach with swords drawn. But that's not what happens. Instead, a ramp is lowered, and a retinue of diplomats descends, dressed in silk robes so elaborate they make the local sultan look underdressed. They aren't here to conquer, they are here to flex. This is shock and awe diplomacy. The Ming Emperor, the Yongle Emperor, wants the world to acknowledge that he is the center of the universe. He doesn't want your land, he wants your tribute. He wants you to bow and admit that, yes, China is the greatest civilization under heaven. In exchange, he will shower you with gifts so lavish, it's embarrassing. You watch as the cargo holds open. The Swahili porters step back, intimidated. The Chinese sailors begin to offload crates, and here comes the porcelain. We've seen porcelain before in the market, but not like this. This is the good stuff. Specifically, Longquan Celadon, you pick up a bowl. It's heavy, thick, and glazed in a mysterious milky green color that looks like jade or deep river water. The Swahili elite go absolutely feral for this stuff. Why? Because of a brilliant piece of marketing. The rumor on the street, promoted heavily by savvy traders, that Celadon plates will change color or shatter if poisoned food is placed on them. In a world where political assassination is a valid career path, this crockery is a security system. But the trade isn't one way. The Chinese want something in return. They want the products of the wild. They want ivory, rhinoceros, horn, and tortoise shell. And yes, they take the shells. This is a fascinating economic crossover. In the Chinese province of Yunnan, cowrie shells are also used as currency, imported from the Maldives, just like here. So when the Chinese treasurer accepts a payment of 10,000 shells from a Swahili merchant, it's a seamless transaction. The shell is the one thing that bridges the gap between the Bantu interior, the Islamic coast, and the Confucian court. It is the universal translator of value. But there is one specific order that has the local hunters scratching their heads. The Chinese diplomats are asking for a kilin. You watch the confusion. The kilin is a mythical Chinese beasted gentle creature with hooves, horns, and a body covered in multicolored scales, said to appear only during the reign of a benevolent sage emperor. It's a symbol of cosmic harmony. The Swahili brokers look at each other, shrugged, and say, "We think we have something like that." They bring out a giraffe. You have to feel for the giraffe in this situation. It's been captured in the savannah, walked to the coast, and is now standing on a beach looking at a wooden wall that is about to become its home for the next 6 months. You watch the logistical absurdity of loading a 19-foot animal onto a ship. They have to dismantle part of the deck. They use pulleys and slings. The animal is terrified, kicking out with legs that can decapitate a lion. The Chinese sailors are fascinated. They stroke its neck. They marvel at its scales, the reticulated pattern of its fur, and its fleshy horns. To them, this isn't a biological curiosity. It's living proof that their emperor is chosen by heaven. The giraffe is eventually loaded, destined for the Imperial Zoo in Beijing. When it finally arrives there, it will cause a sensation. Painters will immortalize it. Poets will write verses about its gentle nature. It is the ultimate souvenir. But look closer at the dynamic on the beach. This moment represents a massive what-if in history. You are seeing a superpower that has the technology to dominate the entire Indian Ocean. They have the ships, the guns, the manpower. They could annex Kilwa tomorrow. They could burn the dhows and seize the cowrie monopoly, but they don't. They trade, they party, they set off some fireworks that terrify the locals, and then, they leave. Why? Because the Chinese economy is self-sufficient. They don't need African resources to survive. They do and need to control the cowrie trade because they have their own internal tax base of millions of peasants. This voyage is a luxury project. It's a vanity tour, as the massive red sails are hoisted again, blocking out the sun. You realize the difference between this visit and what is coming later. The Chinese came to show off. The Europeans, when they arrive in a few decades, will come to take over. The Chinese wanted acknowledgement. The Europeans will want the keys to the vault. The fleet departs, leaving behind a glut of porcelain that will crash the local market prices for a few months. The Swahili merchants breathe a sigh of relief. They made a fortune. They got rid of a lot of ivory and a very troublesome giraffe, and in exchange, they now have warehouses full of high-end ceramics. You walk through the market the next day, the tension is gone, the normal rhythm has returned. But there is a physical legacy of this visit. You see Swahili masons taking broken pieces of the imported porcelain and pressing them into the wet lime plaster of a new mosque. They are decorating the mihrab prayer niche with shards of Ming bowls. It's a beautiful, accidental mosaic. The blue and white of the porcelain against the stark white of the coral stone. It's a visual representation of the trade network, Chinese art embedded in African architecture, paid for with Indian Ocean shells. But while the giraffe sails east, something else is sailing west. The cowries that were loaded onto the dhows earlier aren't just staying in Africa. Some of them are being carried on a journey so long it defies belief. We need to follow the shells that don't go to China. We need to look at the Indian connection, because while China brought the luxury, India brings the necessity. You leave the spot where the giant ships were anchored and head to the textile quarter. The smell of spices is overwhelming. Here pepper, cinnamon, ginger, this is the smell of the Malabar coast. You are about to see how a sea snail can buy the clothes on your back and the flavor in your pot. The dragon has flown, but the tiger is waiting. You leave the lingering memory of the Chinese fleet behind and head toward a different kind of sensory assault. If the arrival of the dragon fleet was a thunderclap loud, impressive, but fleeting, the influence of India on this coast is like the tide. It is constant, rhythmic, and it touches absolutely everything. You turn a corner into the Indian quarter of the market. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It's sharp enough to make your eyes water. You are inhaling a cloud of black pepper, cardamom, cinnamon, and dried ginger. This isn't the scent of Africa. It is the scent of the Malabar coast in Gujarat, transported across the ocean in the holds of those sewn boats. But it's the visual that stops you. You are standing in front of a stall, draped in riots of color, indigo blues that look like midnight matters, that burn with a deep earthy red, and block-printed patterns of flowers, geometrics, and paisley. You are looking at the primary import of the Swahili world, cotton. We tend to think of the spice trade as the main event of the Indian Ocean, but honestly, it should be called the cotton trade. For centuries, India was the textile factory of the world. Long before Manchester or the American South had a single loom, Indian weavers were producing cottons of such high quality and variety that they were literally used as currency. You reach out and touch a bolt of fabric, it's soft, breathable, and durable. In a tropical climate, this is technology. The heavy wools of Europe would kill you here. The rough bar cloth produced in the interior is scratchy and stiff. But Indian cotton, it flows, it cools, it signals civilization. The merchant watching you is likely a Banyana Gujarati trader. He sits cross-legged on a raised platform surrounded by ledgers. He is the counterpart to the Swahili broker. While the Swahili handle the hospitality and the local politics, the Banyans often handle the finance. They are the masters of credit, interest, and futures contracts, and they are obsessed with cowries. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. You might assume the Indians wanted gold for their cloth, and sure, they took gold, but in Bengal and Orissa, the cowrie shell was also legal tender. The Indian economy, specifically in the rice-growing regions, ran on these shells just like the African economy did. So, when a Swahili merchant paid a Gujarati merchant in cowries, he wasn't dumping a useless token on him. He was paying him in a currency that was spendable back home in the village markets of India. You watch a transaction unfold. A porter drops a heavy bag of ivory. The Banyan inspects it, nods, and then points to the shelves of cloth. The haggling begins. But notice the specificity. The Swahili buyer isn't just grabbing random fabric. He is looking for specific patterns. Historians have found letters from this era where merchants in Kilwa sent detailed instructions to the weavers in Gujarat. The customers this year want red borders, not blue. Make the flower patterns bigger. This is fast fashion in the 14th century. The African market was dictating the output of Indian factories. The Swahili Coast wasn't a passive dumping ground for surplus goods. It was a sophisticated consumer market with changing tastes, and this cloth doesn't stay here. Remember the caravan heading to Great Zimbabwe? A huge percentage of that cloth is destined for the interior. In the royal courts of the Mutapa Empire, wearing imported Indian cotton is a status symbol on par with driving a Ferrari. It shows you have connections to the coast, to the ocean, to the world beyond the savannah. But let's go back to the smell. You wander over to the spice sacks. You see a mound of cloves. Later, in the 19th century, Zanzibar nearby will become the world's largest producer of cloves. But right now, these are imports from Southeast Asia, transshipped through India. You are witnessing the birth of a cuisine. If you sit down for dinner in a Swahili home tonight, you might be served pilaf rice cooked with meat and spices. That dish is a culinary map. The rice is from India or grown locally using Asian techniques. The spice is cardamom, cinnamon, pepper. Cloves are from India and Indonesia. The meat is African cattle or goat. The coconut milk is the tropical binder. It is fusion food from 500 years before fusion was a buzzword, and it was all paid for with the humble cowrie. Think about the alchemy of that. A snail shell, harvested by a Maldivian fisherman, travels to Kilwa. It is traded for gold from Zimbabwe. The gold or the shell itself goes to India. It buys black pepper. The pepper comes back to Kilwa. A Swahili cook grinds it into a pot of rice. You take a handful of peppercorns, they are hard, wrinkled, black. In Europe right now, these little berries are worth their weight in silver. Here, they are abundant. The Swahili traders are the gatekeepers of flavor. They sit at the table where the ingredients of the world are mixed. But there is another layer to the Indian connection. Look at the jewelry on the Banyan merchant's wife, who is sitting in the back of the shop. She is wearing gold, yes, but she is also wearing glass beads, millions of them. Beads are the small change counterpart to the cowrie. Produced in massive quantities in India and later Venice, these trade beads flooded into Africa. Archaeologists find them everywhere, scattered in the dirt of village floors, buried in graves, woven into headdresses. Like the cowrie, they are durable, portable, and countable. They became a parallel currency. You realize that the Indian Ocean isn't a barrier separating Africa and India. It's a lake connecting them. The monsoon winds make the journey predictable and relatively safe. It's easier to get from Kilwa to Calicut by boat than it is to walk from Kilwa to the Congo rainforest. The Maritime Highway is the path of least resistance. As you stand in the heat of the textile market, surrounded by the noise of bargaining in Gujarati and Swahili, you realize that you are listening to a linguistic miracle. How are they communicating? The Banyan merchant is speaking a mix of languages. The Swahili buyer is responding in kind. They aren't just pointing and grunting, they are using a language that was literally born for this exact moment. A language that is, at its core, a trading tool. A language that absorbed words like a sponge absorbs water. You listen closely to the chatter. You hear Arabic words for commerce, biyash ada. You hear Portuguese words creeping in like mesa for table. You hear Persian words, and holding it all together is the Bantu grammar of the African coast. The cloth is beautiful, the spices are pungent, and the shells are the fuel. But the software running this whole hardware system is the language. You leave the market and head toward a coffee house to listen. You are about to learn how Swahili became the English of Africa, the ultimate open-source code for doing business. You step out of the intense sensory bath of the spice market and duck into the shade of a baraza. This is a stone bench built into the exterior wall of a house, usually under a large, overhanging thatched or tiled roof. It's the Swahili equivalent of a front porch, a boardroom, and a Twitter feed, all rolled into one. Men are sitting here, sipping spiced coffee from tiny porcelain cups, playing bow, and talking. Just close your eyes for a second, forget the visuals, listen to the sound of the coast. You are hearing one of the most successful open-source projects in human history. You are hearing Kiswahili. To your ear, it sounds rhythmic, melodic, almost Italian in its voelfi cadence, karibu asante tafadali. But if you start dissecting the words, you realize you aren't just listening to a language. You are listening to a transaction log. Swahili is often misunderstood as a mixed language, a pidgin that just smashed things together. But that sells it short. It is a Bantu language at its core. The grammar, the sentence structure, the way verbs are conjugated, that is 100% African, rooted in the Sabaki languages of the coast. But the vocabulary is a history lesson in who had the money. Listen closely to the words for commerce. The word for business or trade is biya, that comes directly from Arabic. The word for profit is faida, Arabic. The word for book is kitabu, Arabic. It makes sense, right? The people bringing the written contracts and the accounting systems were Arabs, so the words for those concepts were imported along with the practice. But wait, listen for the word for money, pesa. That's not Arabic, that's not Bantu. Pesa comes from paisa, a word from Hindi, Urdu. Why? Because as we just saw in the textile market, the people handling the currency exchange, the people sitting on the mats counting the cowries and the coins, were often the Indians, the Banyans. So, when a Swahili person talked about cash, they used the Indian word for it. This linguistic layering is the ultimate proof of how the system worked. You have an African grammatical operating system running Arab financial software with Indian currency plugins. It is a language designed for interoperability. Historians and linguists still argue fiercely about the origins. For a long time, colonial scholars tried to claim Swahili was just broken Arabic because they couldn't believe Africans could build such a complex urban culture. Modern linguists have thoroughly debunked that, showing that the structure is undeniably Bantu. But the debate now shifts to when the fusion happened. Did the trade create the language, or did the language evolve to suit the trade? It's a chicken and egg scenario, but the result is undeniable. Imagine the utility of this. You are a trader from the interior, speaking a local Bantu dialect. You arrive at the coast. You find that the grammar of Swahili feels familiar to you. It shares the same logic as your home tongue. But it also contains the words you need to talk to the guy from Oman or Gujarat. It's a bridge. It lowers the barrier to entry. You don't need a translator to buy a pot. You just need to learn the trade dialect. You sit on the bench and listen to a dispute being settled. Two merchants are arguing over a delivery date. They are speaking fast. You catch words like safari. In English, we think safari means a vacation where you look at lions from a jeep. In Swahili, safari just means journey. It comes from the Arabic safar, meaning to travel, but here it implies a business trip, a caravan. Then you hear another word, bahati luck. It was bad luck, one man says. Bahati is Persian, and there it is. In a single sentence, the money Hindi for the journey Arabic was lost due to bad luck Persian. You have the entire geopolitical map of the Indian Ocean spoken in an African sentence structure. This language didn't just move goods, it moved ideas. It moved Islam. It moved legal concepts. It allowed a merchant in Kilwa to write a letter to a merchant in Mombasa and be perfectly understood, creating a unified information zone that stretched for 1,800 miles along the coast. That is a larger linguistic unity than existed in Europe at the time. While a Frenchman couldn't understand a German, a Swahili speaker could sail from Mogadishu in the north to Sofala in the south and never change his vocabulary. But the most fascinating part of this language is what it implies about the culture, adaptability. Swahili is a sponge. It doesn't reject foreign words. It Swahilizes them. It takes the alien and makes it domestic. Later in history, when the Portuguese arrive, spoiler alert, they're coming. Swahili will absorb words like mesa table and mvinho wine. When the Germans and British come, it will absorb schule, school, and baiskeli bicycle. It is a language that refuses to be rigid. It says, oh, you have a new thing. Cool, we'll take the word for it, bontify the pronunciation, and keep doing business. You watch the men on the bench finish their game of bow. The loser pays up. He hands over a small string of cowries. He grumbles something that sounds like a curse, but ends with a laugh. The social bond is maintained. This is the secret sauce. The cowrie shells were the hardware, the physical tokens of value. But Swahili was the software, the protocol that allowed different operating systems to talk to each other. Without this shared language, every transaction would have required a translator. A drag on efficiency that would have slowed the velocity of money to a crawl. But language is only useful if you trust the person speaking it. You can speak the same words, but if I promise to pay you next year and you don't believe me, the deal dies. And in a world without police, without international courts, and without the threat of a lawsuit, how do you ensure that a guy who owes you 50,000 shells doesn't just ghost you? You look at the mosque across the street. The call to prayer is starting. Allahu Akbar. The men on the bench stand up, dusting off their robes. They leave the game, leave the coffee, and head toward the open doors. This isn't just religion. In the context of the trade network, this is the compliance department. The shared faith, the shared fear of God, and the shared legal code of the Quran are about to become the most important banking tools in the world. You follow them toward the mosque. Because we need to understand how you build a credit card out of nothing but reputation and prayer. You stand in the cool, shadowed colonnade of the mosque as the prayers end. The rhythm of the chanting fades, but the men don't leave. Instead, the formation breaks, and they gather in small circles on the woven mats. You might think they are discussing theology or the finer points of the Quran. And sure, maybe some are, but listen closely. 10 score of ivory, payment in Gujarat within the month. May God witness the debt. You are standing in the lobby of the Indian Ocean's central bank. This isn't just a house of worship. It is the ultimate regulatory body. In a world where there is no Interpol, no World Trade Organization, and no extradition treaties, how do you trust a guy from Oman with your life savings? You trust him because he fears the same God you do, and more importantly, he follows the same law. Welcome to the invisible ledger. The Indian Ocean trade was grease-wheeled by Islamic commercial law, specifically the Shafi school of jurisprudence, which was dominant in East Africa, Southern Arabia, and parts of India. This acted like a standardized operating system. If you wrote a contract in Kilwa, it was legally valid in Aden, Calicut, and Malacca. It standardized the rules of partnership, sharika, profit-sharing, mudaraba, and debt. It was the common law of the sea. But the real magic is the credit system. You see a Swahili merchant hand a piece of paper to a visiting Arab captain. It's not a bag of shells, it's a letter. This is a saftia, a bill of exchange. It's the great-grandfather of the traveler's check. The merchant in Kilwa is saying, I am giving you value here. Take this paper to my partner in Baghdad, and he will pay you the equivalent. Think about the genius of this. It solves the piracy problem instantly. If a pirate boards your ship and finds a piece of paper addressed to a specific banker in Baghdad, it's toilet paper to him. He can't cash it. By divorcing the value from the physical object, the cowrie or the gold, these traders made wealth teleport. They allowed capital to move faster than the ships themselves. But what backs the paper? It's not gold reserves, it's reputation. In this network, your credit score is your biography. Information travels on the monsoon winds. If a merchant in Mogadishu defaults on a debt, the news will reach Kilwa by the next season. And once you are marked as a bad debtor, you are dead. Not physically, but economically. You are exiled from the Ummah of trade. No one will lend to you. No one will ship your goods. In a society where survival depends on connection, this social death is a terrifying deterrent. Historians call this Maghribi trade coalition dynamics, a fancy way of saying that tight-knit religious communities enforce contracts better than police do. If you cheat a stranger, you might get away with it. If you cheat a brother, you lose your community. You watch the handshake that seals the deal. There is no team of lawyers. There is number 50-page terms and service agreement. There is a handshake and the phrase, Inshallah, God willing, and that bond is stronger than concrete. But this trust has a fascinating limit. It works beautifully within the circle of the faithful. But what about the non-Muslims? What about the Banyan merchants from India we met earlier, or the Shona kings in the interior? This is where the interface brokers come in again. The Banyan merchants had their own caste-based trust networks that operated very similarly. When a Muslim Swahili trader dealt with a Hindu Gujarati banker, they were essentially linking to separate intranets. They relied on the long-term stability of the relationship. I won't cheat you because my father traded with your father, and I want my son to trade with your son. It was a game theory equilibrium where cooperation was always more profitable than defection. However, there is a quirky side effect of this religious banking. Usury, Islamic law, strictly forbids riba charging interest on loans. So, how do you build a banking sector if you can't charge for credit? You get creative. You watch a deal happening in the corner. A merchant buys a shipment of cloth on credit, but the price is slightly higher than the cash price. Or they enter a mudaraba partnership, where the investor provides the capital. The merchant provides the labor, and they split the profit rather than charging fixed interest. It's financial gymnastics, but it works. It turns a loan into an equity investment. It aligns the incentives. If the ship sinks, the investor loses his money, he doesn't come after the merchant to break his legs. They mourn the loss together. This shared risk structure actually made the Indian Ocean trade surprisingly resilient to crashes. But as you watch the peaceful, pious scene in the mosque, the murmur of prayers, the clink of coffee cups, the rustle of credit notes, you have to remind yourself of what is actually being funded here. The seftia might be clean, the handshake might be holy, but the cargo, you walk out of the mosque and back toward the harbor. The sun is setting, casting long blood-red shadows across the white sands. You see a line of people being led from a dhow. They aren't carrying ivory, they aren't carrying gold, they are chained. The invisible ledger didn't just track shells and spices, it tracked human beings. The trust that allowed a merchant to borrow 50,000 cowries on a handshake was often built on the collateral of human bodies. We have spent a lot of time talking about the brilliance of the Tretha shells, the gold, the porcelain, the trust. It's easy to get romantic about the golden age of Swahili civilization, but every golden age has a dark basement. And in the Indian Ocean, that basement was full of people who had been bought and sold with those same cheerful little white shells. You stop and watch the line shuffle past. The mood shifts. The clever economics and the beautiful architecture suddenly feel heavy. You are about to confront the commodity that no one likes to talk about in the tourist brochures. We have to follow the cowrie into the shadows. You stand there, the warmth of the setting sun, doing nothing to chill the sudden cold in your stomach. You are watching a column of about 50 people being herded from the beach toward a walled compound separate from the main market. They are dusty, emaciated, and silent. The silence is the worst part. There is no weeping, no shouting, just the dull rhythmic clanking of iron and the shuffle of feet in the sand. You look at the merchant guiding them. He is the same man you saw earlier laughing over a game of Bo, the same man who washed his feet before prayer. He doesn't look like a monster. He looks like a businessman moving inventory, and that is the horror of it. We have spent the last hour marveling at how the cowrie shell democratized trade, how it allowed the poor to buy food and the rich to store wealth. Now, you have to look at the invoice for the other side of the ledger. Those cheerful, shiny little shells were the primary currency used to buy human beings. In the interior markets we visited earlier, the exchange rate was brutal and precise. A healthy young male might cost you a certain weight of cloth or a specific number of cowrie strings. Historical records fluctuate, but at various times, a human life was valued at roughly the same price as a few good tusks of ivory. Think about that. The life expectancy, the dreams, the memories of a person traded for a pile of sea snails that a child could gather in a bucket in the Maldives. You watch the group disappear into the holding pen. Where are they going? Unlike the later transatlantic slave trade, which was focused almost exclusively on agricultural labor in the Americas, the Indian Ocean slave trade was more ... varied. Some of these people will be shipped to the salt marshes of southern Iraq to drain swamps, a backbreaking job that sparked the massive Zanzibar rebellion centuries earlier, a ghost that still haunts the collective memory of the region. Some will go to the pearl fisheries of the Persian Gulf, forced to dive until their lungs burst. Some will be sent to India to serve as soldiers or bodyguards, the Habshi warriors who, in a strange twist of fate, sometimes rose to become kings and admirals in the fragmented politics of the subcontinent. But many, especially the women, are destined for domestic servitude. They will vanish into the high-walled harems of Cairo, Baghdad, or Istanbul. They are being bought for their beauty, their labor, and their reproductive potential. You feel a wave of cognitive dissonance. How does this square with the civilized image of the Swahili Coast? How does the broker who quotes the Quran justify this? The justification is a legalistic loophole. Under the interpretation of the time, it was forbidden to enslave a fellow Muslim. A free Muslim could not be bought or sold. But the people from the deep interior, the Zanj or the Kafir, unbelievers, were considered fair game. They were outside the pact, They were prisoners of just wars, often manufactured specifically to generate captives, and therefore, their enslavement was seen as a legal transaction. It's a terrifying mental gymnastics routine. You create a zone of civilization, the coast, and a zone of barbarism, the interior, and you treat the border between them as a moral event horizon. Once a person crosses that line in chains, they cease to be a person. They become a capital asset. You walk closer to the holding pen, though every instinct tells you to run away. You see a pile of cowrie shells sitting on a table near the guard. They are likely used for small bribes or food purchases for the guards. The irony is sickening. The symbol of fertility, the shell that looks like an eye, is staring at the people whose freedom it stole. This trade also warped the economy of the interior. Remember the chiefs we met, the ones trading gold. Well, gold is hard to dig. Elephants are dangerous to hunt. But people are everywhere. If a chief wanted more imported cloth, more beads, or more power, he didn't need to find a new mine. He just needed to raid his neighbor. The cowrie shell, by providing a liquid, portable, and desirable currency, incentivized warfare. It turned kidnapping into a business model. It militarized the interior. The Pax Swahilia on the coast was paid for by constant low-level violence in the hinterland. And let's not pretend the Swahili themselves were exempt. You look at the stone houses around you. Who built them? Who carried the coral blocks? Who crushes the limestone for the mortar? Who works the plantations on the mainland that feed this city? The Swahili society is a stratified pyramid. At the top are the patricians, the Wangwana, who claim Persian or Arab descent. Below them are the free commoners, and at the bottom, supporting the entire structure, are the Water enslaved. They are the engine of the city. They row the boats, they carry the water. They are the invisible calories burned to keep the lights on. You see a young woman walking from the well, balancing a heavy clay jar on her head. She is likely an enslaved domestic servant. In this context, her life might be relatively mild compared to the salt marshes of Iraq. She might be considered part of the family, albeit a second-class one. She might eventually marry a free man, and her children would be free. The Islamic system of slavery had more fluidity than the chattel slavery of the American South. Manumission was considered a pious act, and integration was possible. But look at her eyes. She is still property. She cannot leave. If she runs, she will be hunted. And the currency of her capture was the shell. You turn away, feeling a profound exhaustion. The romance of the trade winds has evaporated. You can't look at the dhows the same way anymore. You don't see adventure, you see floating prisons. You can't look at the cowrie shell the same way. You don't see money, you see blood. The night has fully fallen now. The stars are out, brilliant and uncaring, above the Indian Ocean. The sound of the ocean is a steady hiss. It's the same ocean that brought the shells from the Maldives, brought the gold from the south, and carried the people to the north. It is an indifferent highway, but as you stand there, wrestling with the moral weight of history, you notice a change in the wind. Not the seasonal monsoon change. This is something else, far out on the horizon. Beyond the reefs, beyond where the dhows usually anchor, there is a flickering light, then another. The year is moving toward. The world is about to shrink. You have spent your time in a closed lupa system dominated by the monsoon, managed by Muslim merchants, and fueled by African resources and Indian industry. It was a system that, for all its brutality, had a balance. It had rules. It had a live and let live approach to trade monopolies. The Swahili didn't try to conquer India. The Indians didn't try to conquer Kilwa. The Chinese came, said hello, and left. But the ships bearing down on the coast now are different. They don't have sewn hulls, they have nailed oak ribs. They don't have triangular lateen sails alone. They have square rigs with big red crosses painted on the canvas. And they don't want to pay taxes to the Sultan. They don't want to negotiate with the broker. They want the whole thing. You hear a distant boom. It sounds like thunder, but the sky is clear. It rolls across the water, shaking the air. That wasn't thunder. That was a cannon. The Portuguese have arrived, and they are about to introduce a new currency to the Indian Ocean: lead and gunpowder. The era of the cowrie shell as the peaceful sovereign of trade is over. The era of the broadside has begun. You are standing on the beach, shielding your eyes against the glare, watching the future sail into the harbor. And it is ugly. After months of admiring the sleek, aerodynamic lines of the dhows with their graceful triangular sails, the ships approaching, you look like floating fortresses. They are squat, heavy, and square. Their hulls are dark with pitch and barnacles, battered by the terrifying journey around the Cape of Good Hope. But what really catches your eye is the symbol painted on the mainsails. It's a red cross, the cross of the Order of Christ. These aren't merchants. These are crusaders who got lost and found the Indian Ocean. You are witnessing the arrival of the Portuguese. The year is 1498, or perhaps the early 1500s, depending on which specific fleet. This is maybe Vasco da Gama's first scouting mission, or the heavier war fleet of Pedro Alvarez Cabral, or Francisco de Almeida. But the specific captain matters less than the mindset they bring. The Swahili brokers we met earlier, the ones who speak 4 languages and navigate with smiles and coffee. They are confused. They row out to meet these strange ships, assuming this is just another business opportunity. Welcome, do you have gold? Do you want ivory? Please, pay the Sultan's tariff and we can dock. They are expecting a negotiation. What they get is a demand. The Portuguese captains, standing on those high quarterdecks, are not here to participate in the Indian Ocean network. They are here to break it. For centuries, Europe has been bleeding silver too by Asian spices through intermediaries, the Venetians, the Egyptians, the Arabs. They are tired of being the customers. They want to be the managers. You watch a tense standoff unfold on the water. The Portuguese sailors look rough. They have scurvy. Their gums are bleeding. Their skin is sallow. They smell of months of confinement, stale water, and desperation. But they have something the Swahili do not: ship-mounted artillery. The dhows of the Indian Ocean are peaceful vessels. Sure, there are pirates, so people carry swords and spears, but you don't put a cannon on a sewn boat. The recoil would rip the stitching apart, and you'd sink your own ship. The Portuguese ships, however, are built with heavy oak ribs and iron nails. They are designed to absorb the shock of a broadside. You see the gun ports open, the black snouts of bronze cannons slide out. This is an out-of-context problem for the Swahili. It's like bringing a machine gun to a knife fight. The stone walls of Kilwa and Mombasa were built to deter local rivals and impress neighbors, not to withstand bombardment by heavy ordnance. But it's the attitude that is truly shocking. You listen to the Portuguese translator often, a degradado, a convict dumped on the shore to learn the language, shout the terms. They aren't asking for a trade deal, they are demanding submission. They want the Sultan to acknowledge the King of Portugal as his overlord. They want a monopoly. The word monopoly doesn't really exist in the Indian Ocean dictionary. The sea is open. The wind is free. Anyone can trade if they pay their taxes. The idea that one nation could own the ocean, that they could forbid others from sailing without a pass, is insanity to the Swahili mind. It's like someone claiming they own the rain, but the Portuguese are deadly serious. They operate on a different operating system. Mare clausum, closed sea, I believe. They believe they have a divine mandate to seize the spice trade and destroy the Moorish Muslim influence. You watch the first diplomatic gift exchange go horribly wrong. Vasco da Gama, on his first voyage, offered the local rulers cheap trinkets, wash basins, hats, strings of coral beads. The Swahili merchants, used to gold and fine porcelain, literally laughed at him. They were insulted. You come from a king and you bring this trash. This humiliation festered. The Portuguese realized they were the poor cousins at the rich man's table. They had nothing the sophisticated Indian Ocean market wanted. Their wool was too hot, their iron was average, their crafts were crude. They couldn't compete on quality, so they decided to compete on violence. You stand back as a boat of Portuguese soldiers comes ashore. They are encased in plate armor, sweating profusely in the tropical heat. They clank when they walk. They look ridiculous, like lobsters boiling in their own shells. But the crossbows and arquebuses they carry are terrifyingly effective. The mood in the market shifts from curiosity to dread. The counting houses go quiet. The brokers hide their ledgers. The women disappear from the streets. The invisible ledger of trust we talked about, it just evaporated. You couldn't have a reputation-based credit system with men who think you are a heathen enemy of God. The Portuguese aren't interested in the cowrie shell. They look at the sacks of Cypria moneta and sneer. To them, it's just a snail. They want the gold the shells bought. They want the location of the mines. They want to cut out the middleman. This is the great tragedy of the encounter. The Portuguese arrived thinking they were entering a hostile wilderness that needed to be tamed. In reality, They had stumbled into a finely tuned, fragile economic ecosystem that was working perfectly. And like a bull in a china shop literally, given the amount of porcelain here, they are about to smash it to pieces. You see a Swahili merchant try to explain the rules. "We trade with everyone," he says. "The Indians, the Persians, the Chinese, you are welcome to." The Portuguese captain shakes his head. "You trade with no one but us, and you will sell at the price we set." This is the birth of the carta system. Essentially, it's a protection racket. The Portuguese will soon demand that every ship in the ocean buy a passa cartas from them. If you are caught sailing without one, your ship is seized, your cargo is stolen, and your crew is thrown overboard. They are monetizing the violence itself. You look at the horizon again. The sun is setting behind the Portuguese masts, casting long dark shadows over the white stone town. The golden age of the Swahili Coast is ending right before your eyes. It isn't ending because the gold ran out, or because the shells disappeared. It's ending because the rules of the game have been rewritten by men with guns. And then, it happens. The negotiation fails. The Sultan of Kilwa, proud, wealthy, and unused to being threatened, refuses to pay the tribute. He points to his soldiers, to his walls, to his history. The Portuguese captain doesn't shout. He just turns back to his ship. He signals the gunner. You see the puff of white smoke before you hear the sound. A split second later, the roar hits you. A section of the coral cornice on the Sultan's palace explodes into white dust. The sound echoes off the water, silencing the birds, silencing the prayers, silencing the centuries of peaceful commerce. It wasn't a warning shot, it was a statement. The bank vault is being robbed. But the robbers aren't picking the lock. They are blowing the door off its hinges. You instinctively duck, covering your head against the falling debris. The age of the merchant is over. The age of the soldier has begun. And you are standing at ground zero of the first global trade war. You are crouching behind a low wall in the courtyard of a merchant's house, your hands over your ears as the world ends. The sound of the bombardment is a physical thingorhythmic, concussive thud that rattles your teeth and shakes the dust from the palm thatch roofs. We talked about how durable coral stone is, how it survived centuries of monsoon rains and salt spray. But coral is calcium carbonate. It is brittle. When a solid iron cannonball fired at high velocity from a Portuguese caravel hits a coral wall, the wall doesn't just crack, it shatters. It explodes into a cloud of white dust and jagged shrapnel. You watch as the upper story of a warehouse takes a direct hit. The beautiful arched windows, the carved wooden balconies, the decorative niches filled with porcelain, they are vaporized in an instant. The houses of stone that gave this civilization its name are being turned back into the sand they came from. This is the sacking of the Swahili Coast. Whether it is Kilwa in 1505 at the hands of Francisco de Almeida, or the repeated burning of Mombasa, the story is the same. The Portuguese didn't come to negotiate a better trade deal. They came to execute a hostile takeover in the most literal sense. The shelling stops, and an eerie silence hangs over the city, broken only by the crackle of fires starting in the thatched suburbs. Then comes the sound of boots. Heavy leather-soled European boots crunching on the coral paths. You peek over the wall. The Portuguese soldiers are moving through the streets. They are disciplined, armored, and ruthless. The local defenders, brave men armed with spears, swords, and bows are cut down by crossbow bolts and arquebus fire before they can even get close. It is a massacre of technology. But the real tragedy happens when the soldiers reach the warehouses. You watch a squad of Portuguese looters kick down the door of a major broker's storehouse. They are looking for the good stuff. They tear open bales of silk. They smash crates to find the gold dust. They grab the ivory tusks, grunting under the weight. And then, they find the cowries. They rip open a sack of Cypria moneta. Thousands of shiny white shells spill onto the floor. To the Swahili merchant cowering in the corner, this is his bank account. This is the wealth of his ancestors. This is the blood of the trade. The Portuguese soldier looks at the pile. He kicks it. He laughs. To him, this isn't money. It's gravel. He scoops up a handful and throws it at the merchant's head as a joke. You are witnessing the death of a currency. In this moment, the agreed-upon hallucination that gave the cowrie its value is shattered. The new masters of the coast don't believe the story. They only believe in gold and silver. They trample the shells into the dirt, crushing them under their boots as they haul away the real treasure. The psychological impact of this is devastating. Imagine an alien invasion where the aliens break into Fort Knox, ignore the gold bars, and instead steal all the toilet paper while burning your house down. It's a total invalidation of your value system. As the day drags on, the fires spread. The specific chemistry of the coral rag comes back to haunt the city. Remember how we said heated coral turns into quicklime? As the intense heat of the burning city bakes the walls, the stone itself begins to calcine. The majestic palaces don't just fall down, they chemically decompose. The city is being unmade. The Portuguese eventually consolidate their hold. They don't want to live in these cities. They find them too hot, too heathen. They want to build forts. You watch as they force the surviving locals to dismantle their own mosques and houses to build massive, ugly utilitarian fortresses. Fort Jesus in Mombasa will eventually rise as the ultimate symbol of this occupation, a grim dark scar on the bright coast, designed solely to project violence. But the destruction of the stones is nothing compared to the destruction of the network. The invisible ledger we admired, it's gone. The Portuguese implement the carta system with brutal efficiency. A Portuguese captain sits at a desk on the doca desk, likely stolen from a local househand issues passes. "You want to sail to India?" he asks, a trembling Swahili captain. "Pay the tax by the pass." "But the tax is more than my profit." The captain protests. "Then don't sail," the Portuguese officer shrugs. "Or sail, and we will sink you." It is a protection racket on a continental scale. The Portuguese don't have the skills to take over the trade. They don't speak the languages. They don't have the connections in the interior. They don't know the trust networks. So they just strangle it. They sit at the choke points and squeeze. The volume of trade plummets. The golden flow from Zimbabwe dries up because the Shona kings hear about the violence and stop sending the caravans. The Indian merchants stop coming because they are tired of being boarded and robbed by Christians. The great Zimbabwe civilization begins its slow decline, partially starved of the trade that fed it. You walk through the smoking ruins of Kilwa a few days later. It's a ghost town. The population has fled to the mainland. The counting houses are empty. The shells are scattered in the streets, worthless debris. The Portuguese have won the battle, but they have lost the war. They wanted to seize the wealth of the Indian Ocean, but by trying to grab it with an iron fist, they crushed it. They didn't understand that the wealth wasn't the gold or the ivory, it was the flow, it was the movement. And you can't force movement at gunpoint. For the next 2 centuries, the coast enters a dark age. The Portuguese cling to their forts, isolated, paranoid, dying of malaria, hated by everyone. They are the rulers of ruin. They have the monopoly they wanted, but they own 100% of nothing. But empires are like tides. They come in, they crash, and eventually they recede. The Portuguese overextended themselves. They are a tiny nation trying to police half the planet. And the locals, they haven't forgotten. They are watching from the mainland. They are waiting, and they aren't alone. Up north, in the rocky deserts of Arabia, a new power is rising, one that remembers the old ways, one that speaks the language of the coast. The Omanis are looking south. They see the Portuguese forts decaying. They see the weaknesses. You sit on a broken piece of coral wall, looking out at the ocean. The Portuguese flag flies over the harbor, limp in the heat, but the wind is changing again. The Cascazi is blowing, and it's bringing a fleet of liberators who, as it turns out, will become the new masters. The shells are down, but they aren't out. The bank is about to reopen, but under new management. You are standing at the stern of a European merchant ship, maybe Dutch, maybe English, maybe French. The warm, spice-scented breeze of Zanzibar is fading behind you. You watch the green island shrink until it's swallowed by the horizon. But you aren't heading east to India, and you aren't heading north to Arabia. You are doing something that would have terrified the medieval dhow captains. You are turning south. You are about to trace the most insane logistical supply chain in pre-modern history. For weeks, the ship plunges down the coast of Mozambique. Then, the water turns steel gray. The air bites your skin. You see albatrosses gliding in the wake. You are rounding the Cape of Good Hope, the Cape of Storms. The ship groans, hammered by the massive swells of the Southern Ocean. It is freezing, miserable, and dangerous. And why are you doing this? Why risk a ship worth a fortune in these waters? To deliver a cargo of snail shells to the other side of the continent, we tend to think of the Indian Ocean trade and the Atlantic trade as 2 separate movies. But the cowrie shell is the character that crosses over into the sequel. As you round the bend and push north into the Atlantic, the temperature climbs again. The humidity returns, thicker than before. You are entering the Gulf of Guinea, the Slave Coast. You drop anchor off the coast of what is now Nigeria or Benin. The surf here is violent, crashing against a shoreline backed by dense mangroves. But look at the canoe rowing out to meet you. The local traders here don't want gold. They don't want your silver coins. They point to the barrels in your hold. The shells, they say, bring the shells. You are witnessing a bizarre geographic arbitrage. The people of West Africa, the great empires of Benin, Dahomey, and the Yoruba city-states have used cowrie shells as currency for centuries. But remember, Cypria moneta doesn't live here. It doesn't live in the Atlantic at all. For hundreds of years, these shells arrived in West Africa via the Sahara Desert. They were carried by camels from the Red Sea to Cairo, then across the endless sands to Timbuktu and down the Niger River. By the time a shell reached the forest kingdom of Benin, it was incredibly scarce and incredibly valuable. It was the Bitcoin of the 13th century, rare, digital in the finger-counting sense, and mined with great difficulty. But now, you watch the sailors pry open the barrels. They aren't counting out individual shells, they are shoveling them. The European powers, the Portuguese, Dutch, and English, realized that they could bypass the desert. They could go to the source. They sailed to the Maldives, bought the shells for pennies, sailed them all the way around Africa, and dumped them onto the West African coast. The scale of this dumping is mind-boggling. In the 18th century alone, it is estimated that Europeans imported over 25 billion cowrie shells into West Africa. That is not a typo. 25 billion. You go ashore to the kingdom of Ouidah in modern Benin. The market here is frantic. But notice the volume of money being moved. Because the Europeans have flooded the market, the value of the individual shell has dropped. Inflation has set in. You don't buy a yam with a shell anymore. You buy it with a basket of shells. You watch a transaction for a large purchase palm oil. Perhaps the payment isn't counted by hand. That would take all day. It is measured in standard baskets. But why keep using them? Why not switch to gold or coins? Because the West African kings loved the cowrie. It was the perfect fiat currency. The king of Dahomey, for example, controlled the terms of trade. He could hoard the shells in his royal treasury, creating artificial scarcity when he needed to. The shells were woven into the artistic culture. You see masks, statues, and thrones covered in them. They weren't just money, they were the aesthetic of power. And there was a darker utility. The shells were small and uncountable in a hurry. If you were a peasant, you couldn't hide your wealth. A pile of cowries takes up space. It's hard to smuggle 1 million shells out of the country. It gave the state immense control over the economy. But you can't stand on this beach without addressing the elephant in the room, or rather, the ship in the harbor. You watch the transaction conclude. The European captain gives the local chief barrels of cowries alongside brass manillas, guns, and alcohol. In exchange, the chief gives him ... captives. This is the triangle trade, but with an extra leg. The shells are harvested in the Indian Ocean, shipped to Europe, sometimes acting as ballast because they were so heavy, then shipped to Africa to buy people, who are then shipped to the Americas to grow sugar, which is shipped to Europe. It is a global conveyor belt of suffering, and the cowrie is the lubricant. You look at the shells scattered in the sand where a bag burst. These are the exact same species of shell you held in the Maldives. They are the same shells you saw in Kilwa, but here they feel heavier. They are soaked in the context of the Middle Passage. Historians have calculated the exchange rates. In the early days, a few pounds of cowries bought a human life. By the late 18th century, due to the inflation caused by the massive imports, the price had risen to hundreds of pounds of shells. It required literal tons of money to buy a cargo of slaves. This logistical burden actually slowed down the trade. Imagine the captain's frustration. He has to load 20 tons of shells to buy his cargo. Then he has to unload those 20 tons in the surf. Then he has to load the captives. It's inefficient, but the demand persists. The cowrie is deeply embedded in the spiritual life of the region. It is used in divination Ifa. It is used in bride price. It is used to decorate the graves of ancestors. Even as the inflation ramped up, the cultural attachment to the shell kept it in circulation. You walk inland to the capital of Dahomey, you see the palace walls. They are decorated with human skulls, a grim display of royal power. But inside the treasury, it is a mountain of white shells. The king is sitting on a pile of Indian Ocean calcium that represents the labor of millions. But he has a problem. He doesn't control the mint. In a normal country, the king controls the money supply. He decides how many coins to strike. But here, the mint is the Maldives, and the delivery trucks are European ships. The king of Dahomey has outsourced his monetary policy to the very people he is trading with. He is vulnerable. If the Europeans decide to flood the market, his treasury becomes worthless. If they decide to stop the supply, his economy seizes up. He is riding a tiger, and the Europeans know this. You see a group of German and English merchants huddled in a factory on the coast. They are discussing the shell question. They are crunching the numbers. They are realizing that harvesting shells by hand in the Maldives is getting too slow. They need more shells. They need them faster. They need to industrialize the supply. You leave the heat of the West African coast with its heavy air and tragic history. You are going to fast forward a few decades. You are going to see what happens when the Industrial Revolution meets the snail shell. We are going to witness the moment the bottom falls out of the bucket. The great inflation is coming, and it starts with a new way to harvest the ocean. You are standing on the dock in Zanzibar again, but the year is now roughly 1855. The graceful dhows and the terrifying Portuguese caravels are gone, replaced by the workhorses of the 19th century, massive three-masted clipper ships and the early smoke-belching steamers. The flag snapping above the warehouse behind you isn't Omani or British. It is the flag of the Hanseatic city of Hamburg. You are witnessing the moment the Cowrie trade goes from a medieval curiosity to a ruthless exercise in industrial arbitrage. You are watching a German trading firm, specifically the legendary house of William Oswald & Co., pull off the greatest currency short in history. Watch what they are loading. The porters are heaving thousands of sacks into the hold of a ship bound for West Africa. But walk over and look at the shells spilling from a torn bag. In the old days, the Swahili brokers were obsessed with purity. They only wanted Cypria moneta, the small yellow-white shell from the Maldives. They meticulously picked out the trash shells, the larger gray-blue ones with the orange ring on the back. That trash is Cypria annulus, the ring cowrie. It sits on the East African beaches in the billions, because nobody here wants it. It's the weed of the shell world. But the German merchants have done the math. They realized that in West Africa, specifically in the booming palm oil markets of Nigeria and Dahomey, demand for currency is so desperate that the local markets have started accepting the ring cowrie. They call it the blue shell. And the best part, you can get them in Zanzibar for practically nothing. So Oswald & Co. is literally scooping up the garbage of the Indian Ocean and shipping it to the Atlantic to sell it as cash. You board the ship and fast forward the journey. We arrive in the port of Lagos, which is rapidly becoming a British colonial hub. The ship docks, the hatches open, and the avalanche begins. We aren't talking about a few sacks. We are talking about hundreds of tons per shipment. In the mid-19th century, European firms poured an estimated 35,000 tons of cowrie shells into West Africa. If you do the math at roughly 400 shells to the pound, that is roughly 28 billion shells dumped into a localized economy in the span of a few decades. You are standing on the beach in Lagos, and you can physically feel the economy breaking. Imagine if a foreign government flew over New York City and dropped shipping containers full of verified $20 bills on every street corner. At first, it's a party. Everyone is rich. You grab a shovel and fill your pockets. But by Tuesday, the bodega is charging $5,000 for a sandwich. By Wednesday, you need a wheelbarrow of cash to buy a pair of shoes. By Friday, the money is trash. That is exactly what is happening here. You watch a woman negotiating for a basket of yams. 5 years ago, this might have cost 40 cowries a single string. Today, she puts down a basket of shells that weighs 10 pounds. The seller shakes his head. More, he says. She dumps another pile. It's absurd. The physical mass of the money is becoming heavier than the goods being bought. This leads to a fascinating and bizarre economic phenomenon known as the cost of porterage. You see a wealthy merchant walking to market to buy palm oil for export. He isn't walking alone. He is followed by a line of 10 robust porters. They aren't carrying the goods he bought. They are carrying the money he needs to buy them. Historians have calculated that by the late 1800s, the cost of hiring porters to carry your cowries consumed about 5% to 10% of the value of the transaction. Imagine paying a 10% ATM fee just to lift your wallet. If you had to travel a long distance, say from the coast to the interior, the cost of feeding the porters who carried the money would eventually exceed the value of the money they were carrying. At a certain mileage, your bank account literally eats itself to death. You walk past a counting house near the harbor. It's a scene of madness. The delicate, meditative art of stringing shells we saw in Kilwa is gone. There is no time to string 28 billion shells. Now they use measures, wooden bowls. One bowl is 2,000 shells. The trader shouts over the noise. But look at the faces of the locals. They are trapped. The cowrie is their heritage. It's their cultural bedrock. They trust it more than they trust the paper notes the British are trying to introduce. But the Europeans are weaponizing that trust. They are extracting real resources, palm oil, timber, groundnuts, and paying for them with a hyperinflated mass-produced token that they are actively debasing. There is a fringe historical theory that suggests this wasn't just greed, but a deliberate strategy of monetary warfare. By destroying the local currency, the colonial powers could force the population to switch to the pound, the franc, or the mark. If you make the traditional money unusable, people have no choice but to use the conqueror's coin. Whether it was a conspiracy or just ruthless capitalism, the result was the same. You watch a young British colonial officer observing the chaos with a smirk. He writes in his journal a reel, quote, "From the era calling the cowrie a bulky, vile currency that holds back civilization." He fails to mention that it is his own countrymen's ships that are flooding the market. But the inflation leads to innovation. You see people finding other uses for the devalued shells. In some parts of Lagos, they stop using them as money entirely and start using them as construction aggregate. You see a builder mixing thousands of cowries into the mud walls of a house. It's cheaper to use money as gravel than to buy gravel with money. The most tragic part is the savings of the elderly. You see an old man digging up a pot of shells he buried 20 years ago. He thinks he has a fortune enough to buy a farm and retire. He takes it to the market. The trader looks at the old money, the pure Cypria moneta, and shrugs. He throws it on the scale with the cheap blue shells. The old man's life savings, which used to buy a herd of cattle, can now barely buy a single goat. This is the great inflation. It is the moment the biological constraints of the currency were bypassed by industrial shipping. The cowrie worked because it was hard to get. Once the steamship made it easy to get, the proof of work evaporated. As you walk through the chaotic, shell-paved streets of colonial Lagos, you feel the tension building. The system cannot hold. The logistics are failing. The British administration is getting annoyed because they can't collect taxes. How do you collect taxes from a village if the tax payment requires a convoy of 50 ox carts to deliver? The colonial government decides it has had enough. They don't want to fix the cowrie, they want to kill it. You are about to witness the official, government-sanctioned murder of a 4,000-year-old economic system. They aren't going to let the market decide. They are going to pass a law. You see a notice being nailed to a tree by a colonial policeman. It's written in English, which few can read, but the message will spread fast. It declares that after a certain date, the import of cowries is banned. But that's just the first step. The real blow is coming. The sun sets on a mountain of white shells that are rapidly becoming worthless calcium. The boom is over. The crash is here. And for the people left holding the bag, the lesson is brutal. Never base your economy on something your customer can scoop out of the ocean by the ton. You are standing in the market square of Lagos, or perhaps Accra, in the early 1900s. The air is thick with the usual humidity, but there is a different kind of heat radiating from the crowd today. It's the heat of panic. A colonial officer, sweating in his khaki uniform, stands on a crate. He is reading a proclamation. A translator shouts the words in the local language, but the message is simple and devastating. From this day forward, the importation of cowrie shells is illegal, and from the 1st of next month, the government will no longer accept cowries for the payment of taxes. You are witnessing the assassination of a currency. We often think of economic collapses as slow, sliding declines. But the great demonetization of the cowrie shell in British and French West Africa was a sudden, violent stroke of the pen. The colonial powers, the British in Nigeria, Ghana, the French in Dahomey Benin decided they were done with the logistical nightmare of the shell. They wanted modernity. They wanted coins that stacked neatly, didn't smell of the ocean, and most importantly, were minted in London or Paris. The officer holds up a small, dull metal disc. It's a bronze penny, or maybe a tenth of a penny, minted specifically for the colonies. It has a hole in the middle, a cynical design choice by the British to make it look more like the cowrie shells or the beads the locals were used to stringing. This, he shouts, is money. That, he points to the baskets of shells at your feet, is dust. The reaction is immediate chaos. You watch a woman try to buy a sack of rice. She offers a standard head of 2,000 shells. The merchant shakes his head. He is terrified. He knows that if he takes the shells, he can't use them to pay his hut tax. He can't use them to pay the import duty on his cloth. The loop has been broken. Shillings, he demands. I need the Queen's shillings, but the woman doesn't have shillings. She has a hut full of shells that her family has saved for 3 generations. In the span of a 10-minute speech, her life savings have technically hit zero. This is the brutal reality of a fiat currency collapse. The cowrie only had value because everyone agreed it did. The moment the state, the biggest actor in the economy, says we don't agree anymore, the hallucination ends. Historians debate whether the colonial governments fully understood the cruelty of what they were doing. Some argue it was simple arrogance, they just viewed the shell as primitive rubbish to be swept away. Others argue it was a calculated wealth transfer by refusing to exchange the old currency for the new one at a fair rate. They effectively wiped out the accumulated capital of the African merchant class. It forced everyone to start from zero, selling their labor or their crops to earn the new scarce coins. It turned independent capitalists into wage laborers overnight. You walk to the edge of the town. What do you do with tons of money that isn't money anymore? You can't eat it. You can't burn it for heat. It doesn't catch fire. You can't really build with it easily unless you crush it first. You see a surreal sight. A road crew is working on a new colonial highway. They are filling a pothole. They aren't using gravel. They are shoveling cowrie shells into the mud. You are literally walking on the bank accounts of the ancestors. The crack, crunch, crack of shells under the wheels of the wagons is the sound of a depression. In other places, the shell standard doesn't die quietly. You see currency smugglers, men running dangerous missions to bring shells across the border from regions where they are still accepted, like the French territories, which were slower to ban them into the British zones. It becomes a black market item. But the most heartbreaking scenes are in the private homes. You enter the compound of a once wealthy trader. In the corner of the courtyard, there is a massive mound covered in a tarp. It is millions of cowries. He sits there, staring at it. He is a millionaire in a currency that has been delisted. He tries to burn them to make lime for whitewash the final, ignoble end of the shell. Remember back in Kilwa when we said a fire could turn your house into plaster? Now people are doing it intentionally. They are cooking their savings just to get some utility out of the calcium. But here is the quirky tidbit that shows the resilience of culture. The British banned the shell for taxes and trade, but they couldn't ban it from the soul. You go to a local shrine. The priest is still tossing cowries to read the future. You go to a wedding. The bride is still wearing a cowrie-studded headdress. The shell retreats from the marketplace but digs in deep at the altar. It transforms from commercial money to ritual money. Even today, if you go to a market in Lagos or Katana, you can buy, but they are sold in the herbalist stalls alongside dried chameleons and herbs, not in the currency exchange. They went from being the dollar bill to being a spiritual token. The colonial government pats itself on the back. They have introduced the pound and the franc. They have civilized the economy. They can now tax people efficiently, but the bitterness remains. The elders tell the children about the time the white men made the money rot. It breeds a deep, lingering distrust of formal banking institutions that persists for decades. Keep your wealth in cattle, they say. Keep it in land. Don't trust the paper. They can cancel the paper. As you leave the market, you see a British official inspecting a new shipment of coins. They are shiny, uniform, and stamped with the profile of King George V. They look permanent. But you, the time traveler, know better. You know that the pound will devalue. You know that the colonial empires will fall. You know that one day, even the dollar might wobble. The cowrie lasted for 4,000 years across 3 continents. The British West African pound will barely last 50. The frantic energy of the crash fades into a sullen acceptance. The piles of shells are abandoned to the jungle. The rain washes the dirt over them. The vegetation grows. The bank vaults of the 19th century are slowly buried by the earth, and that is where they stay. For 100 years, until a guy with a trowel and a brush comes along to ask, "Why is there a mountain of snails in the middle of this forest?" We are fast-forwarding to the present day. We are going to dig up the ledger. The traders are dead, the kings are gone. But the shells, calcium carbonate, is forever. You are standing in the market square of Lagos, or perhaps Accra, in the early 1900s. The air is thick with the usual humidity, but there is a different kind of heat radiating from the crowd today. It's the heat of panic. A colonial officer, sweating in his khaki uniform, stands on a crate. He is reading a proclamation. A translator shouts the words in the local language. But the message is simple and devastating. From this day forward, the importation of cowrie shells is illegal. And from the 1st of next month, the government will no longer accept cowries for the payment of taxes. You are witnessing the assassination of a currency. We often think of economic collapses as slow, sliding declines. But the great demonetization of the cowrie shell in British and French West Africa was a sudden violent stroke of the pen. The colonial powers, the British in Nigeria, Ghana, the French in Dahomey, Benin decided they were done with the logistical nightmare of the shell. They wanted modernity. They wanted coins that stacked neatly, didn't smell of the ocean, and most importantly, were minted in London or Paris. The officer holds up a small, dull metal disc. It's a bronze penny, or maybe a tenth of a penny, minted specifically for the colonies. It has a hole in the middle, a cynical design choice by the British to make it look more like the cowrie shells or the beads the locals were used to stringing. This, he shouts, is money. That, he points to the baskets of shells at your feet, is dust. The reaction is immediate chaos. You watch a woman try to buy a sack of rice. She offers a standard head of 2,000 shells. The merchant shakes his head. He is terrified. He knows that if he takes the shells, he can't use them to pay his hut tax. He can't use them to pay the import duty on his cloth. The loop has been broken. Shillings, he demands. I need the Queen's shillings. But the woman doesn't have shillings. She has a hut full of shells that her family has saved for 3 generations. In the span of a 10-minute speech, her life savings have technically hit zero. This is the brutal reality of a fiat currency collapse. The cowrie only had value because everyone agreed it did. The moment the state, the biggest actor in the economy, says we don't agree anymore, the hallucination ends. Historians debate whether the colonial governments fully understood the cruelty of what they were doing. Some argue it was simple arrogance. They just viewed the shell as primitive rubbish to be swept away. Others argue it was a calculated wealth transfer, by refusing to exchange the old currency for the new one at a fair rate. They effectively wiped out the accumulated capital of the African merchant class. It forced everyone to start from zero, selling their labor or their crops to earn the new scarce coins. It turned independent capitalists into wage laborers overnight. You walk to the edge of the town. What do you do with tons of money that isn't money anymore? You can't eat it. You can't burn it for heat. It doesn't catch fire. You can't really build with it easily unless you crush it first. You see a surreal sight. A road crew is working on a new colonial highway. They are filling a pothole. They aren't using gravel. They are shoveling cowrie shells into the mud. You are literally walking on the bank accounts of the ancestors. The crack-runch-crack of shells under the wheels of the wagons is the sound of a depression. In other places, the shell standard doesn't die quietly. You see currency smugglers' men running dangerous missions to bring shells across the border from regions where they are still accepted, like the French territories, which were slower to ban them into the British zones. It becomes a black market item. But the most heartbreaking scenes are in the private homes. You enter the compound of a once wealthy trader. In the corner of the courtyard, there is a massive mound covered in a tarp. It is millions of cowries. He sits there, staring at it. He is a millionaire in a currency that has been delisted. He tries to burn them to make lime for whitewash, the final ignoble end of the shell. Remember back in Kilwa, when we said a fire could turn your house into plaster? Now, people are doing it intentionally. They are cooking their savings just to get some utility out of the calcium. But here is the quirky tidbit that shows the resilience of culture. The British banned the shell for taxes and trade, but they couldn't ban it from the soul. You go to a local shrine. The priest is still tossing cowries to read the future. You go to a wedding. The bride is still wearing a cowrie-ested headdress. The shell retreats from the marketplace, but digs in deep at the altar. It transforms from commercial money to ritual money. Even today, if you go to a market in Lagos or Katana, you can buy cowries. but they are sold in the herbalist stalls alongside dried chameleons and herbs, not in the currency exchange. They went from being the dollar bill to being a spiritual token. The colonial government pats itself on the back. They have introduced the pound and the franc. They have civilized the economy. They can now tax people efficiently, but the bitterness remains. The elders tell the children about the time the white men made the money rot. It breeds a deep, lingering distrust of formal banking institutions that persists for decades. Keep your wealth in cattle, they say. Keep it in land. Don't trust the paper. They can cancel the paper. As you leave the market, you see a British official inspecting a new shipment of coins. They are shiny, uniform, and stamped with the profile of King George V. They look permanent, but you, the time traveler, know better. You know that the pound will devalue. You know that the colonial empires will fall. You know that one day, even the dollar might wobble. The cowrie lasted for 4,000 years across 3 continents. The British West African pound will barely last 50. The frantic energy of the crash fades into a sullen acceptance. The piles of shells are abandoned to the jungle. The rain washes the dirt over them. The vegetation grows. The bank vaults of the 19th century are slowly buried by the earth, and that is where they stay for 100 years. Until a guy with a trowel and a brush comes along to ask, why is there a mountain of snails in the middle of this forest? We are fast forwarding to the present day. We are going to dig up the ledger. The traders are dead. The kings are gone, but the shell's calcium carbonate is forever. You are on your knees in the dirt. The year is 2024. The tropical sun is beating down on the back of your neck, just as it did on the Swahili masons 700 years ago. But the sounds around you are different. There is no chanting of porters, no clanking of Portuguese armor. There is just the gentle scrape of a metal trowel against dry soil and the hum of a drone flying overhead, mapping the ruins of Songonara. A stone town, just a short boat ride from Kilwa, you are an archaeologist, and you are carefully brushing away centuries of sand from the corner of a room in a collapsed coral house. You hit something hard, you switch to a brush. You sweep away the dust, expecting to find a pottery shard, maybe a bead. Instead, you find a white curve, then another, then 50 more. You have just struck a medieval bank vault. Excavations in these Swahili stone towns have uncovered hordes of cowrie shells that were buried and never retrieved. At Songonara, archaeologists found a stash of over 400 shells in a single deposit. In the context of the 14th or 15th century, this wasn't just loose change found in a couch cushion. This was someone's emergency fund. This was a go bag that never went anywhere. Finding a hoard like this sends a shiver down your spine. It tells a specific, terrifying story. People don't bury their money in the floor unless they are afraid, and people don't leave it there unless they never came back. This pile of snails is a freeze frame of a crisis. Maybe it was buried when the Portuguese cannons started firing in 1505. Maybe it was hidden during a raid by the Zimba cannibals who swept up the coast in the late 16th century. The owner frantically dug a hole, poured in the shells, covered it up, and likely died shortly after. You are looking at a tragedy, preserved in calcium carbonate. But the science of these shells goes deeper than just here is a pile of money. Modern archaeology has turned the cowrie into a microchip of information. By analyzing the chemical composition of the shells, specifically the ratio of strontium isotopes, scientists can sometimes fingerprint exactly where they came from. They can confirm that these specific shells found in a hole in Tanzania originated in the Maldives. It proves the supply chain wasn't a myth. It proves that the globalization we talk about today isn't new. It's just faster. And it's not just East Africa. In West Africa, the archaeology of inflation is visible in the soil strata. Dig down to the layer corresponding to the 16th century, you find a few shells. They are rare, precious, treated like jewels. Dig up to the layer corresponding to the 19th century, the era of the German and British dumping we just witnessed. The soil is practically paved with them. You find thousands. The stratigraphy of the dirt literally charts the hyperinflation curve. The ground itself recorded the economic crash. You pick up one of the shells from the Songonara hoard. It has been in the ground for 600 years. It is stained brown by the soil, but if you rub it with your thumb, that familiar porcelain gloss is still there underneath. It is shockingly intact. This is the irony of the biological currency. If you bury a copper coin for 600 years, it corrodes into a green lump of unreadable metal. If you bury an iron bar, it rusts into dust. But the cowrie waits. It is chemically stable. It is the ultimate time capsule. But look closely at this specific shell. It has a modification. The back is ground down. Remember the counting house in section 10. This shell was processed. It was part of a string. It passed through the hands of a Maldivi harvester, a Swahili broker, a caravan porter, and finally, a frightened resident of Songonara. Archaeologists also find them in places that make no economic sense unless you understand the spiritual dimension. You find them in graves placed over the eyes of the dead or in the mouth. You find them in the foundations of mosques. There is a famous excavation in the Shashalimpopo Basin near the borders of modern South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. This is way inland, and yet there they are. Two tiny Cyprea annulus shells dating back to roughly 700,900 AD. This pushed the timeline of the trade back by centuries. It proved that the Internet of Trade was active long before the great stone cities even rose. You stand up and brush the dirt off your knees. You look at the ruins around you. Songonara is silent now. The mangroves are slowly reclaiming the edge of the island. The coral walls are gray and weathered. But holding that shell connects you to the noise of the past. It acts like a portal. Suddenly, the ruin isn't just a pile of rocks. It's a bustling exchange. You can hear the haggling. You can smell the spices. You can feel the fear of the person who buried this. And there is one final place where the ledger is being dug up, not in the ground, but in the ocean itself. Marine archaeologists exploring shipwrecks from the Maldives to the Cape Verde Islands often find the money ships. They find wrecks where the timber has rotted away. The iron cannons have rusted into concretions. But the cargo remains. A mound of cowrie shells on the ocean floor, looking exactly as they did the day the ship sank. These underwater hoards are the lost blocks of the cowrie blockchain. Millions of dollars that were taken out of circulation by a storm or a reef. They are the missing data points of the global economy. You place the shell back in the sample bag. It gets a number. It gets a label. It will go to a museum in Dar es Salaam or maybe a university lab in the US. It has ceased to be money. It is now an artifact. But as you walk away from the dig site, heading back to the boat that will take you to the mainland, you pass a local fisherman. He is repairing his net. He looks up and nods. Around his neck on a simple nylon string is a single white cowrie shell. It's not money to him. He can't buy a soda with it, but he wears it. Why, for luck, he might say, or for the ancestors. The bank is closed. The currency is demonetized. But the symbol is unkillable. You are about to see how the ghost of the cowrie haunts the modern world, from the fashion runways of Paris to the boardrooms of West African corporations. The shell is dead. Long live the shell. You are sitting on the edge of the pier, legs dangling over the water. The sun has finally dipped below the horizon, turning the sky into a bruised purple that fades into black. The lights of the modern city behind you are flickering on neon signs, street lamps, the glow of skyscrapers. But if you look down into the dark water, the sound is exactly the same as it was in 1331. Slap, hiss, retreat. In your hand, you hold two things. In your left hand, a cowrie shell. In your right hand, your smartphone. Look at them, really look at them. One is a piece of calcium carbonate secreted by a marine gastropod in a tropical lagoon, harvested by a fisherman and cured in the sand. The other is a slab of glass, silicon, and rare earth metals manufactured in a factory and powered by electricity. They look nothing alike, but they are exactly the same thing. Both of them are vessels for a story. The shell is not valuable because it is a shell. It is valuable because a Swahili broker, a Shona king, and a Bengali merchant all agreed to pretend it was. Your phone, specifically the banking app inside, it is not valuable because of the pixels on the screen. It is valuable because you, your employer, and the grocery store down the street have agreed to believe in a digital ledger that none of you have ever actually seen. We have spent tonight traveling through 700 years of history, following this little white shell around the world. We watched it build the stone palaces of Kilwa. We watched it draw the gold out of the great Zimbabwe. We watched it buy the spices that flavored the medieval world. We saw it binding the wounds of the broken, and we saw it buying the chains that broke them. It is a heavy legacy for such a light object. But the most profound lesson of the cowrie isn't about economics. It's about the fragility of the promise. We saw how easily the system broke. When the Portuguese cannons fired, the trust evaporated. When the British flooded the market with mass-produced shells, the value collapsed. The money didn't change physically, the shell was still a shell, but the promise behind it died. This is the haunting reality that every economist knows, but rarely talks about at dinner parties. All money is a confidence game. Whether it's a sea snail, a gold coin, a paper dollar, or a Bitcoin, the asset is only as strong as the relationship between the two people holding it. If I don't trust you, and if I don't trust the government or the God that stands behind you, your money is just gravel. Historians and anthropologists often argue about whether the cowrie was true money or primitive money. The debate implies that our modern money is somehow advanced or real. But looking back at the efficiency of the Indian Ocean trade, you have to wonder if we have it backwards. The cowrie was transparent. You could hold it, you could count it, you could wear it. It had an aesthetic value independent of its trade value. If the market crashed, you still had a beautiful necklace. If the dollar crashes, you have ... paper kindling. Or worse, just a bunch of zeros on a server that doesn't exist anymore. There is a fascinating linguistic fossil that proves how deeply this shell buried itself in our collective consciousness. Look at the Chinese writing system. The character for money or currency bay is a stylized drawing of a cowrie shell. But it doesn't stop there. The characters for treasure, wealth, expensive trade, and even thief all contain the cowrie radical. The shell is literally written into the DNA of the language spoken by over 1 billion people today. The snail died as a currency, but it lives on as the alphabet of value. You toss the shell into the air and catch it. It's cool to the touch. Think about the Swahili broker we met in Section 6. He didn't have police to enforce his contracts. He didn't have a World Bank to bail him out. He had his reputation, his faith, and his shells. And with those simple tools, he built a civilization that connected 3 continents. He proved that globalization isn't a modern invention created by the internet or shipping containers. Humans have always found a way to reach each other. We have always found a way to trade. The cowrie was the first World Wide Web. It was a physical packet of data that traveled from node to node Maldives to Kilwa, Kilwa to Zimbabwe, Zanzibar to Lagos, carrying value and information. It survived the rise and fall of empires. The Ming Dynasty came and went. The Portuguese Empire rose and collapsed. The British Empire spanned the globe and then retreated. But the shell is still here. You can still find them on the beaches. You can still buy them in the markets. There is a comfort in that. It reminds us that while our economies are volatile and our politics are messy, the underlying human drive to connect to swap this for that is permanent. We are a trading species. We need each other. We need the grain from the valley, the fish from the sea, the gold from the mountain. And we will always find a token to make that exchange happen. Maybe in 1,000 years, an archaeologist will dig up your credit card or your hard drive. They will brush off the dirt. They will marvel at the primitive plastic. They will wonder what Visa meant. They will write papers about the digital era and its strange invisible gods. But if they dig a little deeper down past the plastic layer, down past the copper coins, they will find the white layer, the shell layer, the foundation. The ocean is dark now. The rhythm of the waves is slowing down. The bustling markets of Kilwa are quiet. The counting houses are closed for the night. The caravans have stopped moving. The ships are at anchor, their sails furled. You stand up and put the phone in your pocket, but you keep the shell in your hand. You rub your thumb over the smooth, glossy enamel. It feels like a worry stone. It feels like history. You wind up your arm and throw it. You watch the white arc of the shell as it catches the last faint light of the city. It hits the water with a small, insignificant plip. It sinks through the dark water, drifting down to the silt at the bottom. It settles there, amongst the sand and the stones. It has returned to the source. The transaction is complete. The ledger is closed. You take a deep breath of the salty air. It smells of the same ocean that carried the dhows, the same wind that filled the sails. The world is big and old and complicated. But for tonight, the trading is done. The profit has been counted. The debt has been paid. Now it is time to rest. Wind down. The water laps against the pilings of the pier. Slosh, hush, slosh, hush. It is a slow, steady heartbeat, older than the stone towns, older than the ships, older than the first hand that ever reached out to trade. Let the image of the bustling market fade away. The shouting of the merchants dissolves into a murmur, then into silence. The brilliant colors of the cotton and silk, the indigo. The heat of the tropical sun lifts from your shoulders, replaced by the cool, soft touch of the night breeze. Picture the counting house one last time. The candles have been blown out, the ledgers are closed and stacked on the shelf. The sacks of shells are resting in the corner, heavy and still. The frantic energy of the day has settled into dust. The work is finished. You are no longer standing on the hot sands of Africa or the deck of a pitching ship. You are safe. You are still. The journey across the oceans is over. The monsoon wind has died down to a gentle whisper, just enough to rustle the leaves of a palm tree, a soft, dry sound like paper turning a page. Let your breathing match the rhythm of that imaginary ocean, in and out, like the tide rising and falling in the lagoon. There is nothing you need to buy. There is nothing you need to sell. The value of this moment is yours, and it costs nothing. The history is resting under the sand, and you are resting here in the quiet dark. Drift along that current of silence. Let the weight of the gold and the shells sink away. Just the wider, just the night, just the piece of a harbor where the anchor holds fast.